the reason that most Jews feel the way they do about Israel is because of their experience as Jews. They feel that way about Israel because Israel was the answer to Jewish suffering for half of the world's Jewish population. Other ones, most of them once went, like the other big group that went to America, they're the ones that got away, right? They got to America when the doors were open. They got treated as equals. They were actually Americans, right? But for the other half of the world's Jews, it's just true. Sorry. Israel was the savior of the Jewish people. It was. It was. They didn't have anywhere else to go at that point in time. In the war, every other country shut their doors. They said, not my problem. The reason it's anti-Semitic is to oppose Jews for holding those opinions. The reason most of them have those opinions is directly related. It's like inextricably linked to their Jewishness. You guys, we have a debate. We have a debate to review, okay? In one corner, we have Sam Seder, seasoned political veteran of 10 plus years, owns the Majority Report, one of the longest running left-wing alt-media platforms. Good hair. Jewish. In the other corner, Ethan Klein. Internet guy, also Jewish. Okay, let's see.
I feel like it'd be an easy thing to just...
I feel like it's real for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the show. Mr. Sam Seder.
Oh my God, it's Sam Seder. What a nightmare.
Oh no, Sam Seder, what a nightmare.
How have you been, Sam, since we ruined Steven Crowder's life together? Nice to see you again.
I've been feeling very badly for him.
Yes,
over
we're
the
all.
years.
It's a tragic loss of a great career and so much potential.
Yes, it is. Hey, are we live?
He really has not recovered from the incident, has he? Because he was filmed abusing his wife, wasn't he? His abuse is sick. He hasn't really appeared that much in the... Obviously, he's probably still got his loyalists, but in terms of his reach beyond that, it seems like he's still just keeping a low profile. Like, I never see him on my feed anymore. He's cooked. Not Seder, Crowder, you idiot. Steven Crowder, not Sam Seder. They're talking about Crowder, okay.
Live now?
We are live on the H3 channel, yes.
I want to just start by sort of apologizing in that I sent you a DM on Twitter 6 months ago or something. I was just going through to find out, and I just realized you're no longer on Twitter.
Yeah.
So that explains why I didn't hear back.
He may yeah, I didn't see it. I wish I would have, but honestly, I don't know what to do because like I want to get off Twitter, but also it's kind of a pain because Twitter is the way that like I would reach out and speak to most people. But I also don't want to be on a platform that's like owned and perpetuates basically like Nazi. So
yeah, this was yes, I understand that.
Yeah,
but I just wanted you to know I did reach out, and it was on me not to realize that. I just assumed he didn't want to respond, but
okay. Well,
me.
That's nice to know that you reached out. I appreciate that. And the reason, I mean, obviously, people have been pushing for this conversation. I don't know if you know like the whole lore of it, the background of it. I
mean, this is all I know is that Hasan reached out to me sometime. I mean, I got in touch with you October 24th. And I said that I was meaning to reach out for a couple of weeks. So
you're going to watch the Louis Theroux documentary. Yep, after this. We've got it lined up. Don't you worry.
I assume it was sometime in early October. And my thought we were just going to do this off air. But my understanding is that you and he were getting into it, and you felt like because he wasn't Jewish, he didn't have a perspective on this, and that's why he suggested that you speak to me. I don't speak for all Jews, just to be clear.
Right.
I speak for only myself as a in any form.
Well,
whatsoever.
Sam, allow me to speak for all Jews, if I may, today.
Please.
No, well, actually, I mean, that's a total mischaracterization, which is kind of my problem with Hasan, which we can get into if you want. We don't even have to talk about Hasan. But basically what I told him was that I was citing polling data that shows that about 70 to 80% of diaspora Jews have some kind of positive feelings towards the state of Israel. And he was disagreeing with me. And I mean, this is available by polls, readily available by Pew Research just last month, showing that, and I don't know if if you agree with that or not, I can pull it up, but 72% of diaspora Jews have some type of...
Is it diaspora Jews or is it American Jews? Would Pew do a poll on diaspora Jews? Jews, Israel. This is recent, he says. I know in America, a Pew poll from 2024 said that it was about 89% of American Jews have some sympathy towards Israelis. Is that right? Where is it? Young Jews about equally favor military aid to Israel, humanitarian aid for Palestinian civilians. So in America, of all Jewish adults, so it's a majority for every age demographic, even the youth. 74 favor military aid to Israel. Yeah, it's like a plurality for most of them. Majority for everyone, apart from 35 to 49 for humanitarian aid to Palestinians. It's the lead generation. The lead generation is anti-humanitarian aid. Interesting. Most of them think Hamas's reasons for fighting Israel are not valid. Most of them say Israel's reasons for fighting Hamas are valid. Even the youth, 18 to 34. Divided over whether Israel's response to October 7th is acceptable. Most say, the way Hamas was unacceptable. Most of them, it's still majorities for each group saying the Israeli response was acceptable.
Happy Yom
So that's true for Americans. As for the rest, and maybe Ethan can show me a different poll, but when I look through diaspora, it's generally a bit lower than it is for America. So here's what I had from 2020, 22-ish. The US, 8 in 10 said caring about Israel is an important or an essential part of what being Jewish means to them, which is interesting because people say don't conflate Zionism with Judaism. And it's like, well, what if most Jews do that? Like, okay. Because obviously most Israelis do that, like 99%. In the UK, it was 63% identified as Zionist in 2024, down from 72. 69 in Australia. Russia, 61, said supporting Israel is important to their Jewish identity. Canada, 70% are somewhat or very emotionally attached to Israel. France was the lower one, 53. It would average out for diaspora. Then if a lot of them are in America, that probably would average out at about 70, 80% maybe, yeah. It's probably lower now because of the last little while, but okay. I think that one passes the smell test, I guess.
At least positive feelings about the state of Israel. I was stating that fact to him, and he was saying that I was wrong. And I said, who are you to talk about this? I did not say that I only listen to Jewish people, which is a little bit of presumptuous and a little insane.
No, I don't think that's not what I took him to say. But yeah, I mean, Hasan is that's irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I haven't seen that poll. I've seen ones that have said that they have a connection. They feel a connection, either strong or somewhat.
Yeah.
Which is different than positive per se.
So
it seems like for most of these groups it is actually positive as well. Like in America, they support the war. Even 18 to 34, the majority supports the war, 60%, and for others it's like 70 plus. So, okay.
Regardless, I mean, I think if I don't know your upbringing at all, but I mean, certainly my upbringing, my Hebrew education was, I would say, 1/3 Holocaust, and I'm older, and so this was in the 70s, 1/3 into the 80s, 1/3 Holocaust, 1/3 Israel, 1/3 Hebrew, like Hebrew and Jewish culture. And I certainly feel a strong connection to Israel, but I wouldn't call it positive these days.
Sure. I think what the poll attempts to is basically, if you ask Hasan or a lot of people on the left, I think
Yeah, just to double check these diaspora polls. It's identified as Zionist in the UK, most of them. In Australia, it's identified as Zionist. It's in Russia, it's saying supporting Israel is important to Jewish identity for 61% of them, 2018, admittedly. Canada, more recent, it's somewhat or emotionally attached could mean what? They're emotionally attached to Israel, but in a negative way. Like, I guess that's what the Canadian Jews could be saying. But if we're talking about the majority of diaspora, given how America is like the largest diaspora Jewish population, then it's going to be, and they are the most supportive of Israel for diaspora Jews, then like caring about Israel, are we going to suggest that this is what they care about Israel in a bad way? Again, that's just incredibly unlikely because of the more recent polling that we just saw about them mostly supporting the war. And that was from Pew. When was that one? Just double checking. That was from April 2024, so it's already quite far on. Maybe it changed, but I mean, 62% acceptable to 33. Reasons for fighting are valid, 89%. Divided on the government, obviously. It's a different question. Favoring military aid, 74%. Okay. Yeah, it seems like most American Jews are like liberal Zionists. Easy. The vast majority of them.
An emotional attachment is the way to describe this. So it's like if you think
I certainly have an emotional attachment, and it's not. But it's not. I wouldn't describe it as positive.
This isn't the one, is it, Dan? There's the one that shows 73% of diaspora Jews. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Regardless, basically, I want to flesh out my ideas, my thoughts, because I'm being characterized by Hasan and a lot of his cohorts as being, a Zionist, being pro-Israel, being a Israel apologist, being a genocide supporter, being a baby killer, being married to a baby killer, etc., right? My wife is Israeli. I don't know if you know that. So basically, I would like to just take the opportunity to explain my ideas, what I think about Israel, and you can tell me what you think, because apparently I will only listen to other Jewish people. So finally, I can speak.
Okay, I mean, there's no problem with Ethan doing this, but he did say at the beginning he's like, we don't need to talk about Hasan, so we're already talking about Hasan. Oh, no. I feel like if this was me, I would do it more in a kind of proxy sense. I would just say like people online, because it's not just Hasan, right? It's like it's that whole sphere. It's the whole community. He's like the nucleus, I guess, but.
Speak to someone whose opinion matters to me. So thank you. As the official sanctioned Jewish man, Sam Seder, everybody. 100% Ashkenazi? You ever taken one of those?
I haven't, but I'm quite sure I have some Sephardic Jewish ancestry too. So I would mix.
That's good.
Vilnius and Hungary, I think.
Good for you. I think that's always a good thing. My friend, I'm 99.3%. So that's my.
All right,
that's where my authority comes from.
I'll take your word for it.
So at any rate, let me start here by showing you a little context.
Oh, let me also just say, I got about an hour.
Okay, great. I'll just get into it then. Here it is. Not that it matters, but okay, whatever. So let's start here. Let's start with a little icebreaker here. I know we're both fans of Tim Pool. Okay, let's just enjoy this image together. Tim Pool recently at a wedding.
He still had the beanie on.
And can you see that?
Did he get married?
Well, I think he's attending a wedding.
Okay.
And he's very formally dressed, except he appears to be wearing a beanie.
Well, just get a top hat or something, get a fedora. Oh God. The thing is, like, bald shaming is probably, you shouldn't do it. It's not good because who has any control over that? But it's like the fact that like he is so ashamed of being bald. It's like unbelievable how ashamed he is of.
I'm aware of his beanie attachment.
Yeah. So I don't know. I thought this was a fine look for our good friend Tim Pool.
To be fair, he does need to keep his brain secure.
Yeah. So
otherwise it'll just fall out.
Well, let me ask you this: what have you kind of like heard about me? Because I mean, I know that your colleagues have an opinion.
I got to be honest with you. I have not heard much. I have, like, the only thing I really saw that came up in any of my mentions on Blue Sky, I'm also on Blue Sky, is just this issue about talking to me, and I had presumed that that was it. But I don't, like, look, from my perspective, I'm not, and I know that there's been, you mentioned in the email that there's been a lot of grief that you have taken, and I know that other people have also taken grief on all sides of this. And the personal aspects of this, and I don't believe that people. I don't actively attempt to deplatform people. I don't think people should do that. I don't think people should be swatted or tried to be fired or whatever, or have CPS sicked on them or any of that. I mean, I just don't think that's appropriate. I mean, I'm more interested in talking about my
Ideas,
relationship to Zionism and my perspective on what Israel is doing and what is happening in Gaza. And
I totally agree. Let's just talk about the facts. Let me start by showing you this clip. So I've been actually talking about my feelings on the Israel-Gaza Palestinian dispute situation for a long time. I lived in Israel for 5 years as well when I was with my wife early on. Here's my position right after October 7th. And you can tell me if you have any... if you have any comments on any of my positions here, but this was this was from our episode a few days after October 7th. Yeah.
Liars and bad faith weirdos. So here's what I'll say about Israel, okay? Listen, this isn't the first time I've said it, and I'll say it many more times. The cabinet is run by genocidal maniacs.
Hey, I fit quite nicely in here, don't I? That's cute.
Okay, they're led by Netanyahu, who should resign in disgrace and go to prison for being a war criminal.
Yeah.
Okay, he's made a coalition of the most radically conservative freaks that don't represent, by the way, the majority of Israelis, and they're hellbent on genocide, frankly, overtly. They've committed tons of war crimes in Gaza, including the killing of children, obviously, because Gaza is one of the most densely populated places in the world. 50% of the residents are under 18, so when you bomb a building, the chances that you're killing children is pretty much 100%. Mm-hmm. Okay? It's barbaric, it's unacceptable, it's disgusting. I've seen videos, I saw videos of Palestinian dads holding his dead
Not only that, but they also, Netanyahu's government, straight from October 8th, decided that they didn't want any aid to go into Gaza. And they only started to implement an aid plan for trucks entering the strip because Blinken and Biden basically nagged them into it. Blinken had to negotiate with Netanyahu for 9 hours. Imagine having to debate Netanyahu for 9 hours to get him to put aid into Gaza. Mental.
5-year-old daughter. I mean,
I don't need to watch this part because it just gets a little too emotional. But I mean, so that was my take right after October 7th. And obviously that was coming off the end of me being I'm an Israeli citizen. The morning of October 7th, me and my wife were up at 3 a.m. as families were calling into news stations from their safe houses, people being burned alive with their families being murdered while on the phone with news. So coming off of that emotional shock, right, was this was my reaction. Now, I don't know if there's something Zionist or pro-Israel I said there, but maybe I don't understand.
I mean, I think much of what you said was true. I'm not sure, frankly, if what we've seen Israel do in terms of Gaza is not broadly supported in Israel. I'm not seeing the body politic. I mean, I was doing a lot of interviews with Israeli reporters in earlier in 2023 about the protests against what Netanyahu was doing with the judiciary. And there was a question as to whether Israelis would see that this autocracy that Netanyahu was attempting to sort of impose on the country wasn't an extension of what was happening in places like the West Bank and in Gaza in some fashion, and more so the West Bank at that time. And so I think it's hard to make an argument. And look, I would make it's not a perfect analogy as to what's happening in this country, but when you talk about the Israeli population not having a problem with what's going on in Gaza, I don't see a lot of evidence of that. There's certainly, I would imagine, a percentage of Israelis, and I know some of them who think that Israel should stop its assault there, but I don't think it's I don't.
So maybe things have changed, and this largely depends on what America's saying as well. There have been very interesting polls that have been done, where they kind of do like a dummy poll almost, where they ask people a question like, what do you think of this policy? Like, it's a made up one. It's about like some kind of like proposition for a ceasefire or ending the war or anything else. But for half the participants, they would add in the American president wanted this when it was under Biden. And if a proposal was given to Israeli people, but framed as coming from the American government, from the president, they'd be more likely to support it. Even Netanyahu supporters. It's very, so yeah, Israel does actually care quite a bit about what America says for whatever reason. But just to give some context, I don't know if things have changed since October 2024, which is about, I guess, like 7 months ago now. But this is actually fairly deep into the war, and more Israelis than not said it was time for the war in Gaza to end, which meant more people took the position at the time of someone like Yoav Gallant, who wanted to move on to a new phase of not having like full hostilities in the Strip. But Arab Israelis overwhelmingly favored ending the war, while Jewish respondents were split, 45 to 53. So it's a slight majority. Mostly right-wingers wanted to continue the war. So this 53 is being dragged up by Palestinian Israelis, but even if you exclude them, Jewish respondents still more wanted to halt the fighting rather than press on, just a little bit. Okay. I don't know if there's anything more recent. I know that Trump's plan was given a strange amount of favor by Israelis, but yeah, that's why the problem with how can you have a population where the majority are saying we want to stop the war, but then also that same majority says that they want to kick people out of Gaza. It's very strange.
Don't see a lot of evidence that a year and a half later, after you said those things, that this is not the character of the vast majority of Israeli society. I mean, I'm not necessarily convinced that they are as aware. I mean, I've talked to people who have reported in the West Bank, and they said they would go from the West Bank into Israel, and the lack of awareness of what was happening in the West Bank by Israelis was shocking to them. So, I can't say if the Israeli population had a full understanding of what was happening in Gaza, that they wouldn't change their mind. But I don't see a lot of evidence of it.
So as you touched on, this was made basically before the war started. And I think that the unfortunate really...
right now, especially... So that poll was from October. Right now, the Tel Aviv protests, which are still happening regularly, the Hostage Square protests as well, they are now holding up pictures of dead Gazans alongside pictures of hostages, which I don't think they used to do as often earlier on. So I don't know if it's just like the Israeli left have become more vocal against the war in Gaza, but like that poll was from October, and it showed slightly more Israeli Jews wanted the war to stop. So I don't know where Sam's getting he hasn't seen any evidence.
Tragic outcome of the war is how much it's jaded and radicalized, I think, people in Israel. It's really, I think people in Israel feel like isolated. They feel like, the sentiment in Israel is basically that the world wants, the country to disappear. And obviously, like, that's a much more nuanced conversation. But the feeling there has definitely radicalized a lot since the war started. It's gotten a lot worse.
And I think I think that gets to it to some extent. I mean, you have this wholesale slaughter. I was looking up. We killed in Iraq. Depending on what numbers you want to look at, but I think it's safe to say directly hundreds of thousands of people. But even like the number of children that we killed in Iraq, I think has been surpassed by what's happened in Gaza. And I think one of the things that I find shocking is that the sense and look, I experienced this with family members, where the sense that there's a victimization, for instance, let's say on college campus of Jewish students, and I think that to look at what's going on, the totality of what's going on, and to perceive the victims of what's happening here to be the Israeli citizenry or Jews in this country, I think it just blows my mind. I mean,
two people can care about two things at once. Why should people?
Oh, absolutely.
It's a pretty simple solution. Yeah. I'm sorry, but if we're looking at, it's weird that he framed that as just anti-Semitism on campus. It's not just on campus. It's also the fact that hate crimes since October 7th against Jews in the United States have rocketed. I think the increase was something like 60%. So you would never do what would you put that the other way around as well? Would you say oh, I don't know about would you go and talk about how oh, you're talking about Islamophobic attacks in America. Well, don't you know they're dying in Gaza? No, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. Anyone can do that. And also, it is an important question to ask. It's a very important question to ask. Why are Jews in America bearing the brunt of actions of Israel, of the IDF? Why? That makes no sense.
Absolutely.
People who are uninvolved in the war, if they're being victimized in a separate situation because of their Jewish identity, that's a problem, don't you think?
Oh, I do, but
you can care about two things. You can't be oh, these people are ridiculous for caring about anti-Semitism on college campuses because the war's happening. I mean, both we can care about two things.
100%.
And obviously, one is way worse, right? One is way worse.
But that's the point. I mean, one is way worse than what's happening in Gaza.
But who should tolerate being discriminated against based on their identity? You know what I mean? Of course.
Well,
who wouldn't react to that?
I don't think that people are. I don't think that people are being victimized. I mean, certainly, listen, anti-Semitism is real. It was real when I was a kid. There was many times I had pennies thrown at me growing up and playing basketball. I mean, there was a lot of. I've experienced anti-Semitism, but. I would put it in the context of you're a parent, I'm a parent. If my kid is going through something very difficult, it's obviously difficult for me, but it's more difficult for them. And it's a question of prioritizing these things. You can have two thoughts in your head at the same time.
This is FBI stats. I don't know why anti-Semitism went way up after October 7th. It's just a fact. It's in the FBI data. It's okay. Sam is actually, it's funny because Sam has a very hesitant speech pattern. He hesitates a lot. He kind of ums and ahs and everything. But in terms of navigating conversation, he's really rhetorically effective. He's very good at moving the conversation into a position that he wants to. So I don't know. He got good debate skills for sure.
But to center oneself or to perceive that one's victimization is sufficient to ignore the
I got to stop you because I don't think I don't know who's doing that.
Well, I just said you just presented as the Israeli population feels like they're isolated and this and that.
There's two different separate conversations. There's the American Jewry who's I have nothing to do with that place. And then the Israelis, right? So when you're talking about in
terms of the way that you characterize the Israeli feeling, was that they feel isolated, et cetera, and I can understand that, but to not have the first thought of like, we are committing, like you say, genocidal acts. And if people want to call it genocide, I don't, obviously it's got to be, it's a legal term, but I think that it's, colloquially speaking, at the very least, it is a genocide. And to not recognize that as the fundamental issue, the first issue, I think is blinkered. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, it's a little gobsmacking to me.
Well, so I do agree with you that obviously in Israel, people, I think the problem, and just to say on a higher level, I agree with you. Like, obviously the people in Israel compared to like what's on October 7th, they were victims. After everything that's happened, obviously whatever they've suffered pales in comparison to the mass destruction and like wanton death of civilians in Gaza and what's happening in the West Bank too. Lots of awful stuff. That being said, I think the problem with Israel, just to try to explain what's happening there, because I do agree with you, is just like the media apparatus and the feeling that they have there. It's like there's not a lot of space emotionally, and like even the information that they're consuming, I think that would allow them to have that kind of like self-realization. And like you said, a lot of Israelis don't know what's happening
there
necessarily.
Are some. I mean,
there are some. Yeah, of course, there's some.
We what was it in the fall? You had the publisher of Haaretz, speaking out about what was going on there. And the paper was essentially, a cutout, or there was an attempt by the government to basically shut them down on to some extent. I mean, so.
Well, so what's your explanation why Israelis don't care? It's not that they're evil.
Haaretz is not shut down. There was like government funding that they lost, but okay.
Right.
Well, I don't know why I keep saying Haaretz. It's Haaretz, but okay.
I think, look, there's, I'm sure that there is a mass, sort of like a failure to deal with trauma. But I think some of it is, frankly, is a racism. I think, how can you explain, how can I explain how I just watched a clip of people at a Trump rally chanting USA, USA, to watching a video of people being, taken into that prison in El Salvador and having their heads I mean, I don't know how I can explain that. So I don't know how I could explain how the Israelis are able to the extent that they can see what's going on in Gaza, have that reaction. But I know that it's wrong. And I think, some of it undoubtedly is a racism. Some of it is, maybe some type of mass failure to deal with trauma. I mean, I don't know all those things. I think, part of it, I think there's a.
I wonder if he would ever describe Gaza in that way, that it was, so say on October 7th, when they were dragging people's bodies through crowds and the crowds were cheering and spitting on the corpses and shit with their legs bent in like unnatural positions and like just mangled bodies. I wonder if you would ever call that like a failure to deal with trauma. It's such a very strange way to characterize but that's the problem with Sam being like it's this whole problem when people talk about oppressor versus oppressed. I've never understood why this happens. Even if you read like Marx talking about proletariat or bourgeoisie, even when people talk about oppressor and oppressed in class politics, it's like even then there is agency placed on the oppressees, on the people who are at a disadvantage. That's why even Marx spends his whole life trying to push working class people to become more informed and more politically active so they can overthrow the system, right? Like, he doesn't think it's going to happen just like automatically, like drones. but I wonder why, like, when it comes to Palestine, like Palestinians, you can acknowledge oppression. Obviously, if you go to the West Bank, especially, and even Gaza, like before October 7th, to an extent, was like very oppressive conditions. But you can also say that, like, you have to acknowledge that these leaders and these actors have a sense of agency of how to deal with it, because oppressed groups over history who have experienced all kinds of different levels of suffering have responded to oppression in different ways. Like, and these are conscious, like, well thought out ways of dealing with it. If you're in Algeria under the French, they calculated. They said we have a French occupier here. France is not far away. They've got citizenship, so they're here because of economic gains, imperialism, etc. Well, okay, let's make the cost of them being here higher than the benefit, and they'll leave. They're only here for, like, material gain. So as soon as they do that, and then the French responds in the most brutal, bloody, nutcase way possible, and the revolution doesn't die, then yeah, the French left. Like, almost in unison, they all left. In South Africa, people realized that with the population there, they had been there a lot longer. The situation of, like, the Afrikaners and the white South Africans was a bit different from French Algerians. They were more embedded in that society. So the South African way was to be like, okay, it's not likely we're going to chase these people out of the country. What we should do instead is we need to, like, destabilize the system, the regime, but not, like, as much as we can, avoid hurting the people. And they did that. They avoided as much as they could civilian casualties. They basically told people not to do it, like, don't target civilians. And when it did happen, people were reprimanded, or, like, the ANC would apologize for it. And the strategy there was, we're going to constantly say, we want to share the country. We want equality. We want a rainbow nation where white and black people both have a future in this country as equal citizens. But we're also going to destroy power stations and blow up pylons and go on strike and riot. And we're going to make sure that this, like, country is ungovernable until you change. And that convinced not only the rest of the world, it also convinced the white population. White South Africans held a referendum in 1992, a white-only referendum. And they were asked, do you want to keep on negotiating? Do you want to keep on negotiating with the ANC to end apartheid or not? And they voted yes. Majority voted yes. That's why the negotiations continued. So they had strategies. They were oppressed groups with different conscious, calculated strategies. What is the strategy of Hamas or the PLO from the past? Well, the PLO in the past, their strategy was like the Algerian one. They thought that these Israelis, they're all from somewhere else. Let's just attack them until they leave. Well, that didn't work because Israelis are different from French Algerians. Israelis don't have anywhere else to go. They're not going to go back to Iraq. They're not going to go back to Poland or the Soviet Union, right? And by the same token, Hamas kind of does the same thing. Or Hezbollah has the same thing. Like, Nasrallah will say this. You can look at his speeches. If you look at Nasrallah's speeches, when he's trying to, just very shortly before the Second Intifada, he's trying to egg on an uprising, and he very unequivocally says, let the Russians go back to Russia. Let the Ethiopians go back to Ethiopia. It's like, it's not, there's like no ifs or buts. This is him, like, not long before the Second Intifada. Their real land is Ethiopia as far as the Falasha are concerned, and Russia as far as the Russian emigres are concerned. There will be a time when these people will really feel nostalgia for their original homeland, which is like, this is a bad strategy, okay? Like, and people who have been more oppressed than Hezbollah have come up with better strategies. It's like, what are you trying to, you have to ask this question, like, you're oppressed, but your leaders need to make the right decisions. They need to think smart. And this is not smart. This is dumb. This is brain damage. That's why the Second Intifada failed. Israel has had no significant pressure. That's why they haven't left yet. See, you, Artman, you're an idiot. You're a moron. How many rockets have flown over Israeli heads? How many suicide bombings? How many attacks have taken place in that country? How many armies have, Soviet-backed armies at one point, who had better arms than the Israelis did long ago? How many times have people tried to scare them into leaving? They didn't. They did not do it. They didn't do it. Because they don't have anywhere else to go. No pressure, apart from being surrounded by people who want to destroy you all the time. Oh, God.
Some of the makeup of, immigrants to Israel over the past several decades. I'm sure all of that enters into it, and I'm not in a position to sort of like be able to psychoanalyze it beyond the sort of vague notions.
Sure.
But
yeah, and I
from
agree.
my perspective, it's gobsmacking, and to me, it has shown, and I never identified myself as a Zionist as a kid or through the years, and I never identified myself as an anti-Zionist. I don't think I think those it wasn't really until someone heard me articulate my perspective on this that they referred to me as anti-Zionist, and I have I don't really care one way or another how I'm labeled, but to me it shows a failure of that system of government that Israel has, and it has failed both from a perspective of what I think some people had as a notion of Zionism in the 19th century. It has been a failure in terms of
they have nowhere else to go except for all the ones that literally do come from Brooklyn. It's just so stupid. I think like less than a fifth of Israeli Jews have dual citizenship, so you can get rid of them if you want, but again, the ones who stay are the Middle Eastern Jews, the Sephardic Jews. They're more right-wing. You would literally just be making the country more right-wing with a slightly lower population.
Keeping Jews safe, frankly. It seems to be...
Where are we? Let's just watch this. Let's just watch this video.
It has failed both from a perspective of what I think some people had as a notion of Zionism in the 19th century. It has been a failure in terms of keeping Jews safe, frankly. It seems to have been a massive failure. And so I can't operate as someone who lives in Israel, but I can operate as someone who is an American in terms of like what...
Well, we have a contrasting opinion here. People in chat saying that there's not been enough pressure, but Sam saying that Israel's failed to keep Jews safe. It's a very strange way to frame it, because you'd have to, and this is kind of a position that I'm like fairly comfortable with, is that Zionism was obviously full of like unethical practices. If you deny that, you're kind of stupid. Like the formation of the state of Israel, like it had to be built on unethical grounds. It had to be built on some form of like transfer or exclusion and like everything else. But it's like, if the other question though is like, what would have happened if there was no Israel? Like what would have happened to the Jews who fled to that region and tried to buy land, like, and live there as equal minorities? Well, we kind of know what happened in a way, because it's unethical to buy land. Well, buying land is not unethical. Buying land to evict tenants in the thousands who have no workers' rights, that is kind of unethical, yeah. Which they did do, especially mid-20s onwards. Like they evicted a lot of people. And then in war, going to villages and just shooting over people's heads until they flee, or massacring them in the process, like, or even like in Deir Yassin, after people have surrendered and the battle's over, having one family of like 12 people come out of the house and then machine gunning them like out, as they come out the door with their hands up. Yeah, there's a lot of unethical practices that went into Israel securing their state, lots of it. But if there had been no Israel, if it had just been like Jewish minorities in another Arab country, like an Arab state, given how these Arab states responded to Nazism in a lot of them, like say with Iraq and the Farhud and everything, then, and given how anti-Semitism was before the 20th century in those countries, Jews would be kind of, they might be kind of, I don't know, like that's a really difficult question. Like were Jews kept safe by, by Islamic rule in Algeria? Not really, no. Before the French came, there were like 3 pogroms in 30 years. 1805, 1815, 1830. Then when the French come, they are given citizenship in 1870 by the French, and then they're not really safe because they still have resentment from the Islamic population, but also French settlers don't like them either, especially during the Dreyfus affair. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like Jews in the Middle East would not have necessarily been any safer had there been no Israel at all. Like, how do you know it wouldn't have been worse? That's a really difficult counter history. Yeah.
We support which is why I think we should end all aid. And as
to add that to that as well, we do also know for a fact that when Zionists were buying land before 1917, say like early 1900s and late 1800s, there were still attacks. Even when they were buying anti-land, they were attacked because the Ottomans saw them as a threat, largely because they came from Russia. They were at war with Russia. Yeah, they were seen as, and also just because of like underlying anti-Semitism in the Islamic world, they were attacked as well. And not very often did they get justice. So there was already a kind of sign of how things would go to these new migrants to the Middle East had there been no state.
As a Jew who sees my religion being used as what I perceive as a fig leaf for what Israelis or, Zionists are doing. And so, I mean, that's where I'm coming from with this, that I don't know if there is a psychological state that can justify this. In fact, I don't think there is. And so,
it's just an attempt to understand, not justify. Because, I mean, it is what it is, right? Like, it is the way that it is. And so that's for a reason. And it's just trying to explain it. That's all. I agree with everything you're saying. But actually, one thing I want to pivot to and ask you about.
Do you think that we should cut all aid to Israel?
I think that'd be justifiable, yeah.
And
we're talking about like military aid and stuff. Yeah, for sure. Israel can make their own bombs.
Every
if they need, like, they don't need American military. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
I think they do need it.
Israel is not using their religion as a justification, as far as I know. No, when they say that they do it in the name of Judaism, that's very stupid. Yeah, they're not doing it in the name of religion. They're doing it because Hamas have literally said, we want to keep fighting and we will not stop fighting. And the only conditions under which we'll stop fighting is if you let us stay in control of Gaza. And if we stay in control of Gaza, we want to do October 7th again. We don't want to stop fighting until Israel's destroyed. The only ceasefire that that Hamas has said that they would accept is one that allows them to try again later, which is stupid. It's really mental. I don't know. Israelis are quite mental right now. Generally, like when I hear them talk about the war, they're kind of insane. Like even Israeli leftists, to be honest, a lot of them are centrists, but. And a lot of them are massively radicalized since October 7th. The problem is that it should be fairly easy to understand why that's the case. It should be easy to understand. Like the way that the Israeli experience is, and even if you don't agree with anything like I believe in about the peace process or anything else, from the Israeli perspective, they voted for a left-wing government. Despite there being suicide bombings and attacks going on throughout the 90s, they voted for a left-wing government to pursue a two-state solution. And they ended up getting the second intifada and Arafat walking away without a counteroffer. That's what they got. They ended up getting like suicide bombings, like over 100 of them in civilian areas, buses, cafes, pizza restaurants and stuff like that. So yeah, of course they're going to go a bit mental. That's how they see it. Even if you disagree with whoever's to blame for the peace process or anything else, like the Israeli civilian votes for a peace process and gets the second intifada. And they're like, whoa. Why? Does it justify their actions? No. That's why we spoke about understanding, not justifying. And again, if I said this about Hamas, no one would bat an eye. Like, no one on the left would bat an eye if I'm explaining why Palestinians feel like they want to support Hamas. Of course they have reasons for wanting to support Hamas.
To do what they're doing, without a doubt. And
well, what I mean is they're not entitled to it, to say more accurately. Yeah. So yeah, I think military aid should be cut for sure until.
How as a Jew, and you know, I mean, obviously you have a different connection to Israel than I do, as you know, through your family and whatnot.
My position on this would be: why would Palestinians want to support Hamas? Oh. Because that was their homeland, like that region, they considered it their homeland under the Ottoman Empire. It was Arab land, like it was lived in mostly by Arabs, and a bunch of European-backed weirdos came over from Europe, and they felt kind of like they acted like they were a bit above them and superior, and they didn't try to learn the language. And then they displaced people through evictions, and then they acted surprised when people attacked them, and then when they got attacked, they would reciprocate with like disproportionate attack, and they would like do things even as early as the 30s where they would respond to Arab attacks by coming back on the entire village. And then you had the 48 war, where again, most of the people who were ethnically cleansed from those villages were civilians. Even in some villages where the village leaders and the people who lived there made a very good effort to avoid fighting, and they still got kicked out. Some people surrendered and they still got killed. So, and then that happens, and then they're into two different spaces like the West Bank and Gaza, and they don't really get all that much help from the rest of the Arab world, apart from the only people who seem to help them are these weird dictators who keep saying, yeah, come on, we'll back you up, like you'll take out the Zionist entity, we'll any day now, we'll arm you and everything. And then you're just like, whoa, maybe I'm gonna, like, yeah, why would we give up? Just because it happened 75 years ago, like we still have a moral right to this land. Yeah, that's probably why they would want to support Hamas. And especially if it's post 2005 and you've grown up and you're one of those people who basically all you know is Hamas rule in Gaza, then the only Jew you've ever interacted with really is a plane flying over your head and bombing you, or some silhouettes at the border, and if you get too close they'll shoot you. So yeah, like the Palestinian experience is not like, I can argue all the flaws in the argument and in the leadership and everything like that, but it's not like it's illogical. Like it's not like it doesn't make sense to why they would feel that way.
And through having lived there, but as a Jew, I take such offense to what is being done ostensibly to protect me and my family and my ancestors and my progeny and all of it. I think it's, I think the conflation of Zionism and Judaism is both not keeping Jews safe.
To be fair, I don't think Israel gives a f about protecting American Jews, but okay. Unless the American Jews run away and go to Israel.
And is...
For that question about military aid, if you want my position, I think America should not quit aid like unilaterally. I think the military aid should just be used as leverage, because we know in the past that when America threatens to stop military aid, they get concessions out of Israel. That's what I think it should do. I think it should be used to extract concessions. And if it doesn't extract those concessions, then bin it. Then get rid of it. That's my position. I don't think Israel needs American bombs to fight Hamas, though. I think they can make their own weapons. They can use blunter weapons, and yeah, I don't think that's going to stop them fighting. But just on principle, why were you against using aid for concessions before? I was never against using aid for concessions, Mr. LeBron. But okay.
Wrong at its core, and we can see what it's even doing in the context of this country, the way that it's enabled Trump and to attack universities and to attack law firms and whatever. And so I don't know. And if you agree with that, great. If not, I'm happy to discuss it with you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. And part of the reason why, like, this chasm started between me and, you know, Hasan is very influential. So when he...
So you were for an arms embargo. Did you listen to what I just said? I said they should use the military aid as leverage. That's different from what these guys want, which is like a unilateral arms embargo. Like, don't even give it back in exchange for concessions. That's what these guys want. I don't think the arms embargo types are like, yeah, you can keep sending them weapons if they do X, Y, and Z. Like maybe like dismantle an outpost or a settlement here, or let more aid in there. I don't think that's what these guys would satisfy them, allowing arms to go back to Israel, unless the arms embargo crowd have just been the worst communicators on the planet. But okay.
He decides that somebody is an enemy of the movement for criticizing him, which is what I perceive happened, then it kind of becomes reality. For example, one of my criticisms of his is him not supporting Kamala Harris. Now, would she have stopped the war and been like a perfect dove? I don't know, but I know she would have been better than Trump. I know that for sure. Trump's posting like this insane Riviera, Gaza, the Riviera with Trump hotels. I mean, that's, and like he's sending the 20-pound bombs. He's telling Netanyahu, you have a blank check to do whatever you want. Now, like, it
just came out that Biden didn't, did nothing to, I mean, listen, I think.
No, that is a lie. That is a lie that Sam is alluding to there. That is a complete lie. First of all, Biden did nothing to what? First of all, on aid, Biden absolutely contributed to getting aid into Gaza. We know this because it was said so at the time that when Gallant was talking about human animals and no food, no water and everything else and aid being stopped, We know that it took 9 hours of negotiation between Blinken, the Biden administration, and the Netanyahu government to develop an aid plan for Gazan civilians. We know that. This is from October 17th. He's referring to a drop site Twitter investigation. I know, Teuton, don't worry. But first of all, they did facilitate aid. They did push Israel to accept putting aid in. That's also true about from the Bob Woodward book, that the Israelis didn't actually want to resume aid, even when the border fence had been repaired. If you want to talk about the drop site thread, well, drop site, lying. That's crazy, chat. Where are we? It's interesting with this because the lie is actually in the quote. Like the debunk is in the quote. So he says, this is the former Israeli ambassador, Michael Herzog. God did the state of Israel a favor that Biden was the president during this period. We fought in Gaza for over a year, and the administration never came to us and said, ceasefire now. It never did, and that's not to be taken for granted. Now, ceasefire now is different from ceasefire. Ceasefire now was the protester demand that Israel unilaterally stops, regardless of what Hamas is doing, takes the hostages back, and then leaves Gaza with no concessions. That's what the ceasefire now meant. Ceasefire, which meant agree on a ceasefire deal to maybe push it towards a more permanent ceasefire, which is what Biden was actually pushing for, which he said constantly was actually happening. We know this because the ceasefire that took place, that got broken by Israel, happened under Biden. Biden was still the president when that ceasefire went into effect. It was his plan. That was Biden's plan. What do you mean Biden did nothing to further a ceasefire? That was his plan that went into effect. Fuck me. So how can he do that without saying ceasefire? Oh, it's because ceasefire now is a different demand.
I used
the arbitrator of the real meaning of words.
Okay. General, but the last few years
hang
have
on.
proved very telling. Matter total balm cake. Emma Cluley's, S and Sam becoming more ignorant, dishonest, and sides cucked.
Thanks for the £10. I don't understand these people in chat. Doodlescape. Like, how stupid. Okay, so Biden did nothing to further a ceasefire, but the ceasefire that just passed happened under Biden. As did the first one, actually. What are you talking about? Biden did nothing to further a ceasefire, apart from the 2 times when he furthered a ceasefire. One occasion of which was his plan. His plan. The Biden plan. The one that Biden proposed. How do you hold these positions in your head? You're so dense. Jesus.
Well, I'm talking about Kamala.
I suspect that, I suspect.
This is where the lefties say it was actually Trump and Witkoff. Beautiful.
That she would not have had the same policies as Trump, did nothing to, I mean, listen, I think.
Well, I'm talking about Kamala.
I suspect that, I suspect that she would not have had the same policies as Trump. But at the same time, I think that it was a massive failure, both on a real human level, like it would have, I think, had she articulated anything even remotely close to what I would hope her difference would have been, I think it would have probably had implications in the election. But I think perhaps even more importantly, it would have maybe implicated the behavior of Israel. So
thanks for the $10. I wonder if it's also just like, do these people just not care about? I thought Hasan was for harm reduction, so maybe he's different from Hasan. Like, this was Hasan's statement on it, just so you remember.
So no, especially considering that she lost by wider margins than even the protest votes combined, this is an insane statement to advance. Regardless of the hypothetical reality where Kamala Harris would not be as bad as Donald Trump, which we have no proof for.
Poor Hutch. This is how Hutch lost his hair. I don't know if you guys remember with the aid situation. We have 3 incidents where Israel did fully block aid to Gaza, like in either the entire strip or to parts of the strip. There was full blocks. The first one we just spoke about, which was ended because of pressure from Biden and Blinken. Okay. The second one was in October 2024 when they were implementing. This was a bit more of a controversial one within Israel because it doesn't seem to be that general staff had actually adopted it, but it was being put through anyway, like I guess by whoever was in charge of the north, like not including Gaza City, but like the north, which was just I think Beit Lahia and maybe Jabalia, like a very like the small part of the north. There was an aid blockage here for exactly just over 2 weeks in October 2024, and this incident resulted in Harris and the Americans threatening to reconsider weapons aid to Israel.
About weapons embargoes, but what was the first thing Trump did when he took office? Resumed weapon shipments. Why would the Pentagon need to resume shipments?
Well, the 2,000-pound bombs, no real difference, really. This was on October 13th. The UN reports that no food has entered northern Gaza in nearly 2 weeks. Israel must fight urgently to do more to facilitate the flow of aid to those in need. Civilians must be protected and must have access to food, water, medicine, international humanitarian law, and must be respected. This is after the United States just put forward a warning to Israel saying that we are going to reconsider weapons shipments to Israel and review if you don't resume aid to the north. 1 day after, Koga announces that trucks are entering the north, 30 trucks. And this was at a time when the north was like fairly underpopulated. I think there was maybe like, at one point in October, there was like, the population in the north had gone down from like 200,000 to like 60 or 70,000. Then it went down to less than 10,000 at one point. So they're putting trucks in the day after, and then on the 16th, even more trucks go in to the north, through the Allenby Bridge crossing at Erez West. So, and this came just after the US letter to Israel, saying that they had 30 days to boost humanitarian access or risk having military assistance cut off. And then I think the final United States verdict on this was that Israel hadn't met all of their requirements, but they had done enough. They had done enough to satisfy the demands. So it's the difference between people getting aid and people getting no aid. Like, that's a huge difference. That's a big difference between like going 2 weeks with no aid and what we have now, which is, I think we're on almost day 60 or past day 60. And how much has Trump said about aid to Gaza? Nothing. He hasn't said a word. The only people who are pushing for aid now are like internal figures. The IDF chief of staff wants to resume aid. Israel Katz has even said that it's time to resume aid. But the Israeli government, with no pressure from the United States, with a total blank check from Trump, is able to be held up by people like Smotrich and Netanyahu. Like even Israel Katz said Israel would have no choice but to resume aid deliveries to the war-torn Gaza Strip within the next week or two. Well, it's been 1 week since he said this. Still no aid going to Gaza. That's the difference between Harris and Trump, just so you know. It's a big difference.
I mean, look, I chose to support Harris because I perceived her as the lesser of two evils. But
yeah, me too. And I think that's an important distinction to make at a time like this. Yeah,
I can certainly understand how some people were just so repulsed by what was happening that it made it almost impossible for them to vote for Harris. I think
I understand why they didn't. I totally understand the perspective. Like, I'm so disillusioned with this administration, I can't support Kamala. But at the same time, like a hugely influential political streamer like Hasan, who has a huge influence on people, I think, and who's someone who who's very vocal about being pro-Palestine. I feel like it's an abdication of responsibility to be like, I'm not voting for Kamala, or I'm not telling you who I voted for. I suspect he voted for Jill Stein personally, but either way, he hasn't said, and he wouldn't endorse her. Now, like, if you're just like a random protester or whatever, and like you're like,
that's a little bit of conjecture. I don't think Hasan would have voted for Jill Stein. If he voted, he either voted Democrat or just no one. Like, yeah.
Discuss it, I don't want to vote, that's fine. But if you're like a high-level political streamer and basically you have the capacity to weigh like the lesser of two evils and what that means, I feel like it's an abdication of responsibility to not make that call.
It's a poor guess from Ethan.
I mean,
I feel like I would deja vu because this happened last time when Ethan said that he thought Jill Stein would get Hasan's vote.
No, I certainly have been critical of people who, generally don't vote for the lesser of two evils, but I think, and certainly, in the run up to the 2016 election, I certainly, that was my perspective. But again, what the Biden administration was doing was so horrific that her inability to signal that there would be any change, I think sometimes you have to take this at face value. And I think there would be certainly, definitely other things. You would not be assaulting the government like Trump is. But, I think probably this is the first election in as long as I've been doing this, and I think it's been 5 elections now. I mean, I'm old, that I couldn't really condemn someone from taking that position based upon what we were seeing. I mean,
it's not just some random person. I do, and I'll tell you why. Kamala Harris.
It's interesting that Hassam's big debate with Jimmy Dore was all about harm reduction. Even though, I'm sorry, like you're just ignoring large parts of the conflict if you think that Democrats wouldn't have overseen like harm reduction in Gaza. Like, I'm sorry, it's just a fact. Unless it's a total coincidence that now is when we get 60 plus days of no aid to Gaza, no sign of any opposition from the United States, versus what happened with the Democrats. Yeah, I don't know. Silly.
Wanted a ceasefire. She stated that. Trump said, "Finish them." I mean, let's be honest. Like for someone like Hasan,
I want a ceasefire.
I'm not voting for Biden. I'm not talking about Biden.
No, I understand, but we found out that Biden, in fact, did nothing to bring that about.
Apart from the fact that his ceasefire proposal got implemented, Sam. Apart from the fact that it was his plan that went in, did nothing. Because of this one quote, it's just a quote from someone saying ceasefire now, which again, in the entire, like, in the context of the discourse on Israel-Palestine, on the conflict, that ceasefire now had a much more specific meaning than just any ceasefire, like a hostage exchange ceasefire.
So,
well, you can talk about Biden. I'm talking about Kamala Harris. What she said.
I mean,
well, she's the vice president. I mean, at the end of the day, she doesn't really do that much, right?
No. But I'm talking about the candidate. Biden, as a president, said he wanted a ceasefire. She, as a candidate, said, "I want a ceasefire."
Well, do you not? Even if you're like, I don't know how much I trust them. One's like, "I want a ceasefire," and the other one is like, "Finish them."
Well, listen, I think it was certainly obvious to me that Trump was going to be worse. But I think, like, if you're trying to get the candidate to show some indication of this, I can understand that. I mean, I wouldn't do it. I would disagree with it. But
yeah, and I get your point too. Like, ultimately, I understand why people wouldn't want to support them because of what they've seen, and like that, it feels like it also
shows a tremendous amount of just like electoral malfeasance on her part. I mean, they made an active choice. And I think, you could have put that Palestinian law.
Just so you guys know that if Harris had actually done what is satisfactory to this side of the internet, she would have just lost everyone. Like, I don't know what to say. Most Americans don't identify with this position that they're wanting to push. Like this whole, like, unilaterally ceasefire now, just Israel stop firing, take the hostages and just leave Gaza and give it back and let all the aid and the reconstruction materials go into the hands of Hamas so they can try again later. This is a ridiculous position. It is a childish position with regards to a ceasefire demand. But that's what they want. That is what they want. Electoral malfeasance. Gaza was not that high on people's reasons for voting in America. But okay.
Lawmaker from Georgia on stage, they made an active choice to signal to whomever they were signaling that they weren't going to do anything. Now, I happen to believe that she would have been better on this than Trump, but they were making an active choice to do that. I mean, it was really electoral malfeasance on her part, in my opinion. But I don't know what the point of litigating this is per se. But
well, we're talking about kind of my criticisms of Hasan and how this.
I don't.
Well, let me show you this.
I don't care.
Yeah,
about,
I know.
Honestly, I'm like
Let me show you this. This is
I'm
more.
Not, I honestly. Like,
yeah, you don't care. I know.
I don't care.
If Hasan's statements were defensible, why would you If it was easy to defend Hasan, why wouldn't you just go with it? I don't know.
And why should you? I don't blame you. We talked about anti-Semitism, and you think that I don't want to put words in your mouth, right? But you seem to have conveyed that, compared to the destruction and everything happening, the genocide, the loss of life in Gaza, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, that obviously that's way more important. So let me show you an example of something. And again, I know you don't care about the drama. To me, this isn't drama. This is one of the biggest, most influential streamers spreading something that I think is really dangerous. And you can agree or disagree, but it's a short clip, but I'll show it to you, and you tell me what you think.
69% of Dems have a negative view of Israel. Like, Tutan, that doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. I have a negative view on Israel, okay? That doesn't mean I support what the arms embargo, unilateral ceasefire crowd is pushing for, okay? Come on.
This will never happen, but in a totally just world, any kind of, regardless of your background, any kind of Zionist tendency should be treated in the same way as being a rabid neo-Nazi.
Jesus Christ.
And you shouldn't even let someone be the local dog catcher.
Any kind of Zionist tendency should be treated as so. If you think Israel has a right to exist, that's all you need. My man.
As Felix was posting, if they've ever exhibited any sort of like positive feelings about the state of Israel, I'm so serious about this.
Now, by the way, he didn't misspeak. He doubled down on it yesterday. He said, no, I agree. That's what I think. Now, just to recap, he says,
we don't hate most Jews, chat. Only most of them. Only most of them.
Anyone that's had positive feelings at any point about the state of Israel is a neo-Nazi that's not fit to be a dog walker. Now, to me, that seems like extremely dangerous, dehumanizing language about what...
What's your definition of Zionism? I use the definition of Zionism, which is that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state. Like a Jewish majority state. Yeah. I don't think it has a permanent right for that. Like, it's not set in stone. But when there's no guarantee that... When you've got like the last 100+ years of Jews having a pretty time in the Middle East as minorities, then yeah, Israel should probably be allowed to exist as a Jewish state. Yeah, just as Palestine has a right to exist as an Arab state.
Could arguably be 70% of the Jewish diaspora, and certainly probably people in your family.
I'll tell you, there's some hyperbole there, but
that's putting it mildly.
I think, he says Zionism, and I'll tell you what I think is really...
Sorry, I got to correct you. He says Zionism, and then he says, if you had positive feelings about the state of Israel at any point in your life.
I got to tell you, if you if you look at what's happening right now, and you have positive feelings about Israel.
He said at any point in your life, Sam. Just to be clear about what he said.
Would I have said at any point in his life, someone's life? But I just think this is such a petty, like the idea that we're going to police. Hold on, let me respond. You want me to respond this?
No,
like I say, I don't care about this. But if you're going to force me to respond to it. What Israel is doing right now is so far beyond the idea that someone says any time in your life or not or whatnot. He's talking about Zionism, and frankly, I think it's very difficult for me to understand how someone could have positive feelings at this time. Now, you want to say in the past and what? Okay.
Yeah.
Am I wrong, or doesn't Sam support a two-state solution? Like, that would be slightly, that's quite Zionist. That would be slightly Zionist in Hasan's eyes. I don't understand. Huh.
Say, I will grant you at any time in your life that is a,
but maybe he's probably become a one-stater at this point now, right? He's probably like the equal rights for both groups. Juju. That's probably where he's standing. Yes. I love that. That's the ultimate. The white colonizer. Palestinians don't want that. They don't want one state for two equal people in a democracy. Israelis don't want that, but I want them. I want them to have it. I'm pushing it on them. No choice, guys. Get along.
But too broad a step. But wait, let me finish.
Yeah.
But see, you go in and you're making this about anti-Semitism by doing this hopscotch about a poll that people had positive feelings that Jewish people do, and then therefore he is anti-Semitic. And honestly, that type of conflation, I think, is so dangerous and so disingenuous. I mean, this is, I don't want to get too...
Who's doing the conflation, though? Who's doing the conflation? If a majority of Jews in the diaspora, not even to mention, half of the world's Jews live in Israel, and basically all of them are Zionists, who's doing the conflation when most Jews are the ones who say that, like, Israel has some level of importance to their Jewish identity, or they have positive views of Israel? That's the majority of the diaspora. Who's doing the conflation? Are the Jews doing it themselves by saying that, like, about their opinions? What the
passionate about this, but I will tell you something. I have had a guy who went to my bar mitzvah, my sister's bar mitzvah, my kid's bar mitzvah, sat at Passover with me 3 or 4 times, call my father and ask him if I'm anti-Semitic. Now, this is just one, that is just an example, an illustration of conflating when he's clearly talking about Zionism. Was it hyperbole to say any time in life, whatever? The fact of the matter is this conflation is dangerous for Jews. It is a fig leaf and a way of weaponizing anti-Semitism.
Is it dangerous for Jews to give the opinions that they give about Zionism? Is that dangerous? So when a Jew answers in a poll, yeah, I have positive feelings of Israel, are they putting themselves in danger by doing that? Are they conflating? When they say, Israel is an important part of my Jewish identity, like the existence of Israel is important to me as a Jewish person. This is what a lot of these people say. This is what most Jews say in the diaspora. This is such a stupid dialogue tree. The dialogue tree here is basically like, okay, so you've got Hasan saying, I think we should actively discriminate against people who have even the slightest sympathy for Israel, okay? And then someone says, doesn't that mean that if you look at the polls, most Jews would cross that threshold? Most Jews are slightly Zionist at least and have slight sympathies for Israel. Does that not mean this guy just wants to discriminate against most Jews? Like most of them are fair game? And then the response is, why would you conflate Zionism with Judaism? You're endangering Jews. That's so stupid. That is not a logical follow-up. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. What the Sorry. You know, the only real position is, and a lot of these people actually believe this, like they do, they just don't want to admit it. It's that the polling on Jewish opinion on Israel in the diaspora is pretty clear. It's pretty clear that most of them would cross the threshold for Zionist to people who like especially like lefty Puritans. That's just true. The problem is that they can't contend with that because they think that being even a bit Zionist basically makes you a Nazi, which is insanely stupid. It's ahistorical. It's the most disgusting false equivalence. It's not historically accurate. You can hold that position. You can hold a position that you think that, but then the bullet that people don't want to bite, people like Hasan and Sam or whatever, the bullet they don't want to bite is that in their world, the majority of Jews on the planet just happen to be, at this moment in time, quite fasci. That's the bullet they don't want to bite for whatever reason, even though everything they say up to that leads you to that conclusion. I think Zionism is Nazism, or Zionists should be treated like Nazis. I think even if you're slightly Zionist or slightly sympathetic towards Israel, you should be treated like a Nazi. Most Jews in the world cross that threshold. Do you think most Jews are kind of like Nazis? Oh, I wouldn't say that. Like, why not? Why not?
That has enabled Donald Trump to do the he's doing, that has enabled the slaughter of thousands upon thousands of children and women and men, for that matter. It is not keeping Israelis safe. And this type of conflation, Ethan, is what I find far more irresponsible, frankly, than the idea that he said
polling data is so irresponsible. And again, what's funny about this is that with Sam's response about the conflation is that the logical conclusion of what he's saying is that if that conflation is dangerous, then according to Sam, most Jews have opinions that are endangering themselves. If the conflation is dangerous, if saying like Jews have more sympathy for Israel or identify more with it or feel some kind of affinity with Israel, and that's enough, then that would mean that that they're the ones doing the conflation. They're the ones who are endangering themselves. by having the opinions they do about Israel. Like, it's their fault. Jesus. Sorry if it's not my place to say, but this is a problem for Jews to confront and repair, and not a problem for the rest of the world to accommodate. For the overwhelming number of Jews in the world, there's a connection with Israel at the very least. It's where half of our people live. Our Judaism and our sense of Jewish peoplehood are inextricably intertwined. Yeah, see, this guy here, Matt Leck, this guy, this Jew hater, is being honest. I appreciate this person. Yes, this is the actual conclusion that other people don't want to commit to. Yes, this person will tell you that, yep, sorry, this is true. Yeah, most Jews, they're just kind of like Nazis. I don't know why. I don't know why they did that. I don't know why the Holocaust did that to them, but they need to deal with that. Fuck them. Like this, that's what this guy's saying. Thank you, my man, Matt. Honest Matt. Honest translation of this. Matt is Jewish. No. You're so dumb, liberal. Let's just say, okay, yeah, take your word for it. Wow, he's probably, then that would make him the first ever Jew on earth who has had bigoted opinions towards Jews. That would make him the first person ever to do that. That's crazy.
Positive any time. I mean, look, you do a show
Sam,
4 hours a day. He does a show 5 or, as far as I could tell, 15 hours a day. And to focus in on that one tiny clause.
Apparently he's not even Jew. Okay.
Not one tiny clip, Sam.
Well,
you don't know.
wait
This is a totality of behavior.
But you wanted
and by
to
the
bring
way,
this
it's
up.
easy,
I
I appreciate that you can hand wave it away and say that it doesn't.
No, I'm not hand waving it away.
Well, you kind of are.
I'm saying this
You're saying
conflation.
It doesn't. You're saying actually I'm wrong for caring about.
No, yes. In fact, I'm saying this conflation is incredibly dangerous. It is disingenuous.
I think it's dangerous
right now,
to ignore what's being described as dehumanizing violent language for American Jews that have nothing to do with the war.
That is a complete mischaracterization of that.
It's not.
No, it's not. He said that. What did he say? He said that you should be not even allowed to be a dog walker or something. Like they should be treated as neo-Nazis. Yeah, that means that most American Jews, because again, most American Jews still think that Israel's response to Hamas was like appropriate or whatever. That's still the majority polling data from Pew. So, even in this poll that Hasan was using from the Middle East Eye, remember this one? 1/3 of American Jewish teens say they sympathize with Hamas, quote unquote. Israeli government poll shows. It's funny that people try to extrapolate just from this headline, but you understand dog catcher. I don't know what's that? Is that? I think he means dog walker, but okay. I don't know what a dog catcher is. I am uninformed. The funny thing about this poll is that the same respondents also said that they consider themselves to be Zionists. 62%. 84% said that they believe Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish state. So again, in this world, this is 84% of American Jews are, what, neo-Nazis? Can't even be a dog catcher? Rip. Sorry, guys, if you want to catch dogs. Whatever that means.
He's
not fit to be a dog walker?
He never says the word Jews.
He says a neo...
Listen, how many members of Kufi have positive feelings towards Israel? Wait. How many millions of members of Kufi, the Christian organization, have positive feelings for Jews? It is clearly not a function of their Judaism. It is not a function of their Judaism. And so it is not specifically...
I mean, it kind of. Just because other groups have motivations to support Israel. The reason Jews have an affinity towards Israel is because if you know anything about the history of Israel, it's that for the entire last 2,000 years, Jews were by everyone, by the Romans, by the Muslims, by the Christians. And eventually, when you reach the point in the late 1800s when they were fleeing Russia because of pogroms, a very small number of them decided that, you know what, why don't we go back to the place we keep talking about in our prayers, like our Passover or whatever, next year in Jerusalem? Why don't we go to that place? Why don't we go to Israel, where we used to come from? Okay, so we go over there. And then they negotiate with different world leaders to try and establish like a more solidified presence there, like a more national identity or like a border or a state or something like that. And then as the 20th century comes around and starts progressing, the number of Jews going to Israel to flee persecution is quite low, to Palestine. Most of them don't go there. But after 1925, the number of Europeans fleeing persecution running over to Israel massively increases. And it increases because that's the same year as the Johnson-Reed Act, when America closed their doors, 1924-25, to Jewish immigration. So America, the promised land where Jews, this one place Jews could actually go and just become Americans, and that was like the liberal Jewish dream, that door is shut to most of them, so they go to the Middle East instead. And then you've got like the rise of Nazism. You've got the fact that like most of Eastern Europe, where a lot of them flee, like further east, is not safe for them. The Soviet Union is not particularly safe for them either. You've got the Evian conference where people are refusing to let them in all over the world, barring one country, the Dominican Republic. So you have all of these Jews very quickly realizing that in order to get away from this show in Europe, we're running out of options, and one of the only options left seems to be this bizarre project of trying to like establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine. So we're going to go there. And then Israel is formed after being attacked by 5 different armies and the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, and they commit a lot of war crimes, everything else. That all happens. And then the rest of the Jews in the world, largely the Middle Eastern and North African Jewish population, they start to realize that, wait, why the are we getting blamed for the war crimes committed by Jews over in Palestine? Why are we like suffering because of that? Why are like in Algeria, why is the government not even offering citizenship to Jews after they get independence? That's true. They didn't. Why in Morocco are Jews getting attacked, like in pogroms? Why was there a Nazi-inspired pogrom led by a pro-Nazi leader in Iraq? Why is there all this violence against Jews all over the Middle East escalating, even though protections under Islamic rule were never great anyway? So most of them end up going to Israel, hundreds of thousands of them, only in a few years. All these Jewish communities that have existed for 2,000 years in these areas, just empty, overnight pretty much. And then they get to Israel, and then they're attacked, and they're attacked on all sides by 5 different armies, and then there's a war of attrition, and like the people refuse to recognize them. Then you got the 6-Day War, and then 73, and it's like people have this affinity with Israel because for quite a big chunk of history of the last 100 or 150 years is there was really one safe space for a lot of Jews, and that one safe space was Israel. For most of them, it was like that or you die in Europe or in the Middle East. Or you just live a pathetic, like miserable existence as a very like suppressed minority. That's why Jews have positive feelings towards Israel. Because although you can concede all of the facts about how it was founded on unethical terms, how it was founded on deportations and on evictions and on ethnic cleansing and murder and all that, you can say that all this happened and all this was in some ways kind of like, in some ways it was almost always going to happen to some degree or another because of like what they were trying to do. But then you also have to acknowledge that the alternative to it, which is rejecting Zionism, like rejecting the idea of a Jewish homeland in this area at this time, especially once a lot of them are there, like say rejecting the partition plan or rejecting the Peel Commission, like or rejecting even the concept of partition, not even percentages, just rejecting the concept, then that consequence is worse because unfortunately for a lot of Jews, half of the world's Jewish population, that was their only option. Most of the Holocaust survivors after the war ended went to Israel. They made up a quarter of the Haganah. They came out of, the war ends, the concentration camps are liberated, they're put back into concentration camps because the British and the Allies don't know what the fuck to do with them. Most of them go to Palestine. So I'm just saying, that's probably why most Jews have an opinion that's positive towards Israel. It's not necessarily just because of Judaism, although obviously there is a religious connection as well. No, it's because Israel was the lifeline. It was the rope. It was a rope that was thrown up to them. And for a lot of them, they would have just stayed in Europe and died otherwise. Or they would have stayed in Algeria and not been citizens. Or they would have stayed in Morocco and maybe been killed in a pogrom. Or they would have stayed in Iraq. And if they stayed in Iraq, they were about to get thrown into concentration camps by the prime minister. He said he was going to do that.
Jews.
No.
Yes, it does, Sam.
It describes most Christian evangelicals, too.
It may do them, too, but it also describes 73%
so
of
that
Jews.
Is not anti-Semitism.
It's not anti-Semitism just because evangelicals also support Israel for completely different reasons. Okay. Well done, Sam.
I don't know. What do you call it when somebody's discriminating against the vast majority of a racial or religious group, Sam?
I'm sorry. You want to look at evangelical Jews?
I don't care about evangelical people.
Okay, but I'm talking about the way you're constructing this.
I think
so you can say the same thing about Christian evangelical Jew,
What is this logic? Why? What is this logic that because a majority of evangelicals support Israel, that means that attacking people for supporting Israel doesn't mean you're also going to attack mostly Jews. Like you're going to attack most Jews. If you want to attack someone. Like well, he's not, that's like a complete absence of critical thought. It doesn't make any sense.
Evangelicals too. It is not anti-Semitism.
It's like saying the Holocaust wasn't anti-Semitic because other groups were also targeted. Yeah, what? They attacked like Roma. What? Like, okay. And?
It is not. It just isn't.
Like, taking one example in isolation, which is what we've done here.
Well, you're the one who gave it to me.
Yeah, well,
I don't even want to talk about it,
I disagree
but I'm
with you.
using your example. And in that instance, that is not anti-Semitism.
Well, I disagree.
Conflation. Okay, well, that's our disagreement.
Yeah.
But I think that conflation is incredibly dangerous.
Well, I disagree as well.
For Jews,
I think
it's dangerous for this society.
I think, frankly, I think it's dangerous to what I perceive as hand waving what's happening here. I know you said you aren't doing that.
I'm not hand waving. This
you're doing the opposite. You're endorsing
decades of thought about this.
So right, sure. But the point is, you're saying that this is not dangerous. How dare you care about this? I think it's dangerous
No, I'm not saying that at all.
There's nothing wrong with living as a minority if you are safe. I agree. It's a shame that every Arab and Muslim country of the last 100 years has not been able to provide safety for Jews. Sorry. What do you mean? What? And you're sorry, but you are pissing in the wind if you think Palestine with an Arab majority would be the first one. That would be the first Arab or Muslim country that offers safety to their Jewish minority. That is mental.
Personally, I mean, Jewish people have a collective memory of trauma, Sam, and it starts a certain way. And it starts with dehumanizing language, like saying you're not fit to walk a dog. I mean, what are we doing here? It's irresponsible language.
He's not talking about Jews. He's only talking about most Jews. Okay.
He's talking about 73% of Jewish people.
No, you said that.
No, that's a poll that's readily available.
Is there something inherent in Arabs that makes you say this? No, of course it's not inherent. What are you talking? At one point, actually for quite a lot of history, Islamic rule was like a golden age for Jews. Long time ago, but it was like 1,000 years ago. And even when the Ottomans or the Islamic rulers were quite like sultans and all that, even when they were kind of to Jews, they were nothing like the Europeans for most of the last like few hundred years. I'm just saying nowadays, okay, at this point in time, yeah, the Islamic world is kind of for Jews. Sorry, like.
No, you made that connection. He did not, because we have millions upon millions of members of Kufi. We have millions upon millions in this country of evangelicals who also believe the same thing.
Does your dad have?
You cannot say it's anti-Semitism.
Could you describe?
You cannot say it's anti-Semitism if you're also including millions upon millions, far more Christians than Jews.
Would you say that your father, who you mentioned, said something to you, that he's ever in his life had positive feelings about the state of Israel?
I've had positive feelings of Israel.
Well, does your dad have any positive feelings about it now?
I would assume so.
Not in terms of like I support them, but I think
positive feelings. I went to Israel on.
Okay, good. Then you're a neo-Nazi, not fit to walk a dog. How do you feel about that?
No, that's you saying that.
That's literally what he said. I'll play it again.
I think like this will never happen, but in a totally just world, regardless of your background, any kind of Zionist tendency should be treated in the same way as being a rabid neo-Nazi. And you shouldn't even let someone be the local dog catcher as Felix was posting if they've ever exhibited any sort of like positive feelings about the state of Israel. I'm so serious about this.
Another thing he's doing, by the way, and Hasan
listen.
He plays around with the term Zionist.
It is pretty dead to rights, I guess. It's pretty dead to rights. It's an insane thing to say. It's absolutely insane.
Right.
You can say that's a wrong thing to say, but he's not talking about Jews. He's talking about people who have exhibited these positive.
Okay, Ethan needs to learn how to debate. What you asked Sam is, would most Jews not cross this threshold? Would you not cross this threshold? That's what you need to ask.
Feelings, and that includes millions upon millions of Christians. More Christians.
Okay, well, listen, I don't think they're neo-Nazis, not fit to walk dogs, either. I think it's insane language.
Listen, you don't want to tell me that you have never engaged in hyperbole. You and I both are in this business, and we do that.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I just think that,
it's listen. You can say it's an inappropriate thing to say. It's an unfair thing to say.
I just think like Arabs that support Israel aren't fit to walk a dog.
It is not anti-Semitism.
Okay, well, we're at an impasse on this one.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean,
someone on Twitter, incidentally, because I was fighting on Twitter, I was replying to the replies. That's how you know I was in a good mood last night. It's someone did ask me an interesting question. Someone did ask me a good question, which was, okay, what if like most Jews, like 90% of them, supported like killing all the Palestinians, just like Holocaust them? I'd be like, would that be anti-Semitic to oppose them for that, or to call them like up or fat to say or like fascist or whatever? Like, kind of yes and kind of no. It would be anti-Semitic in the sense that like, okay, well, you hate most Jews, okay? You think most Jews have something wrong with them. It's also not, though, in the sense that Jewish people's reasons for supporting Israel, or sympathizing, I mean, with Israel, because most of them do, again, is not just like a function of this particular ethno-religious group has just lost its way for some reason. That's not why it's the case. The reason that most Jews feel the way they do about Israel is because of their experience as Jews. Is because of their shared history as Jews. They feel that way about Israel because Israel was the answer to Jewish suffering for half of the world's Jewish population. Other ones, most of them once went, like the other big group that went to America, they're the ones that got away, right? They got to America when the doors were open. They got treated as equals. They were actually Americans. They were not like in Europe where you can become like a decorated military guy, like the most integrated Jew possible, and still get framed as a spy, right? But for the other half of the world's Jews, it's just true. Sorry, get banned. Israel was the savior of the Jewish people. It was. They didn't have anywhere else to go at that point in time. In the war, every other country shut their doors. They said, not my problem. They imposed quotas, so a very small minority. Even after the war, America made like a little exemption from Johnson Reed, but Johnson Reed stayed in place for the most part. It was a very small number were able to go to America. The others had to stay.
Half now, half after you complete the mission. Lonerbox cake.
Hey, that's just $10. So I'm just saying, like, the reason it's anti-Semitic is to oppose Jews for holding those opinions is because those opinions are actually kind of like, the reason most of them have those opinions is directly related. It's like inextricably linked to their Jewishness. That's why they feel that way, which is why it would be anti-Semitic to attack them for that, but not anti-Semitic to attack them for, let's say, if they supported like actually ethnically cleansing Gaza,
But anyway, another thing he does is he says Zionist tendencies, and he's someone that plays around with Zionism. He calls me a Zionist, and again, I know we're arguing here about semantics of what Hasan said, but I don't think that you could accurately characterize me as that, as it's used colloquially. You don't know, right? But he's saying Zionist tendencies. What does that mean? What's a Zionist tendency?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to talk to him on Friday. You can ask him what a Zionist tendency is. I suppose I would guess, and like I've looked at polls too, where people have various different understandings of what Zionism is, but I think it is my guess, and I don't know what he was thinking specifically, but the notion of an ethno-state that engages and allows whatever in the name of Zionism allows for this mass slaughter, I think is horrific.
Sure, me too.
Okay. I mean, then I think we the three of us agree on that regard.
Yeah, I think we're so. Another thing is like to take it even further. I mean, Hasan pretty much like openly supports Hamas.
Let's not talk about Hasan. Let's talk about this.
Sure. I mean, what do you want to ask me?
Well, I mean, if you want to ask me about, I mean,
Well, let me.
I'm not.
Are you saying anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism? No, there's a way to oppose Zionism without being anti-Semitic. The problem is that the Venn diagram between Zionist and Jew is pretty close. That's the difference.
Here to explore.
Yeah. I have a list of things
but if you want to talk about Hamas, I mean, I think, look.
Well, how do you feel about Hamas?
Hey,
I feel that Hamas, people can perceive it as a liberation organization.
Oh, no.
We call them terrorists in this country. We call the ANC
terrorists. What do you think about them, Sam?
Oh my God. It's okay. I know they talk about the ANC. Thank God, Ethan, for knowing about the ANC. Let's go.
Listen, I think there are parts, I would imagine, of...
Yeah, we also called ISIS terrorists, okay? Maybe just talk about what the group does, rather than whether or not the United States brands them a terrorist for whatever period.
Hamas that have done good for the people in Gaza, and I think they have done bad things. But I sort of feel, I guess, ultimately probably like Ehud Barak, when he said that were I Palestinian and I was living in Gaza, that it would be likely that I would join Hamas. I mean, that's what Ehud Barak said on multiple occasions. And I think that is very, that is an understanding of human nature.
That you're not affording Israelis, by the way, just to point out an inconsistency there.
How so?
Well, you're like, I refuse to understand human nature and their reaction. It's just evil, and I don't know how to explain it.
I didn't use the word evil.
Right. I'm inferring because I asked you if you think they're evil, and you didn't really answer that.
Listen, I don't know what Gazans felt on October 8th, but toward Hamas. But I can tell you that there is a long history of terrorist organizations or so-called terrorist organizations like the ANC or the IRA, even the PLO,
now, Sam,
that ultimately become a political organization.
I think the comparison to Hamas to what happened in South Africa is insanely disingenuous. And I personally hate when people do that.
I mean, Mandela didn't think so.
Well, Mandela did think so.
Mandela did. What do you mean? Mandela said nice things about the PLO. People are so dumb. So the PLO throughout most of the 60s, 70s, 80s were, they engaged in terrorism. They targeted civilians. They murdered civilians. Yeah, like the Coastal Road Massacre. They crossed the border, found a bus full of civilians and killed them, right? They did that quite a lot. When Mandela was saying nice things about the PLO, that was in 1990, throughout the 90s. Mandela was supportive of the PLO, and all those clips of people use of him being supportive of the PLO at a time when Arafat had publicly renounced terrorism and offered to recognize Israel at the UN. He did that in 88. So, okay. Well, we'll get into it.
So he explicitly stated that he avoided committing violence on the citizenry because it would make reunification impossible. That's something he said.
I think you can say that tactically speaking. Listen,
what did he say there? For the peace process, yeah?
Violence on the citizenry because it would make reunification impossible.
Oh, reunification. That's true. He did say that. He said those exact words. This is him when he was on trial in the 60s, talking about his philosophy. 4 forms of violence were possible. There is sabotage, there is guerrilla warfare, there is terrorism, there is open revolution. We chose to adopt the first method. Sabotage did not involve loss of life, and it offered the best hope for future race relations. Bitterness would be kept to a minimum, and if the policy bore fruit, democratic government could become a reality. It's tactical. It's very, very clever. It's tactical. It's so fun. And he said that. He said they tried to avoid violence against the citizenry, which is why I think if you look at the number of deaths caused by the ANC in South Africa, it's quite low. It's very low. They did happen. There were sometimes attacks that killed civilians. There were some that targeted civilians. But again, as per the ANC's words, this was not policy. This was not their general directive. These were it was often the result, according to the ANC themselves, this was often the result of either poor training or just rogue actors. Yeah, they targeted pylons, like infrastructure. They even say, It was based on careful analysis of the political and economic situation of our country. We believed that South Africa depended to a large extent on foreign capital and foreign trade. We felt that planned destruction of power plants, interference with rail and telephone communications, would scare away capital from the country, thus compelling the voters of the country to reconsider the position. This is what Arafat would say this, but he just wasn't very good at it. Arafat would say, I have a gun in one hand, a freedom fighter's gun in one hand, and an olive branch in the other, right? The only problem was that no one really knew what Arafat's olive branch looked like. So we don't know what he wanted the end to look like. And his freedom fighter's gun often did target civilians. For Mandela, the gun was aimed at infrastructure, and the olive branch was end apartheid and voting, and one person, one vote. That was it. It made sense. It was straight to the point, and it worked. Well done, Mr. Mandela. Hasan's response to this is hilarious. I'm so like, oh my God. Hasan's response is hilarious. Cool Maps, did you know that during apartheid, in the space of about just maybe around a decade, 3 million South Africans, Black South Africans, were deported from the cities and sent to the Bantustans, forcibly, evicted and deported, like ethnically cleansed. That happened within apartheid. Don't stop acting as if the actions of Hamas are proportionate to the length of the conflict or the violence. It's just not true. It's just not the case. There have been groups that have gone through a lot more pain than Hamas did and didn't do October 7th, okay? There's also the fact that Hamas never offered the two-state solution. They never did. They only said, withdraw to the 67 borders, let all the refugees return, and then maybe we'll negotiate. That was Hamas's position, okay? They never actually offered to recognize Israel, ever. Even in their new charter, they still say it's all Palestine, all of it. Every last Dunham. Sorry, Hasan's response to this is so funny. He's absolutely molding. Look at him.
His audience thinks
I don't know what Gazans felt on October 8th, but toward Hamas.
He's crashing out.
I can tell you that we have there is a long history of terrorist organizations or so-called terrorist organizations like the ANC or the IRA, even the PLO,
now, Sam,
that ultimately become political organizations.
I think the comparison to Hamas to what happened in South Africa is insanely disingenuous. And I personally hate when people do that.
I mean, Mandela.
Why? Oh, because their approaches were completely different. You illiterate.
Didn't think so.
I can't even call him illiterate because you need to try to read something about South Africa and Hamas to be illiterate. But okay.
Well, Mandela, South Africa is insanely disingenuous, and I personally hate when people do that.
I mean, Mandela didn't think so.
Well, Mandela did think so. He explicitly stated that he avoided committing violence on the citizenry because it would make reunification impossible.
Twice they asked
That's
Nelson
something he
Mandela,
said.
if you disavow violence, we will let you go free.
Did you see what he did there? He started screaming when Ethan was mid-sentence. So Ethan said Mandela opposed violence against the citizenry, but just because Hasan heard violence, he thought he had a W to think that Mandela was just like a salt marcher, like a non-violent MLK, which he wasn't. He was violent, but he was violent against infrastructure. Like, he's how stupid, how embarrassing, man. The biggest left-wing political streamer on Twitch. Absolutely disgusting.
People do that.
I mean, Mandela didn't think so.
Well, Mandela did think so. He explicitly stated that.
He's baffled. He's baffled that someone would think that comparing Hamas and Mandela is a bad comparison.
He avoided committing violence on the citizenry because it would make reunification impossible.
Twice they asked
That's
Nelson
something he
Mandela,
said.
if you disavow violence, we will let you go free.
In the
I will not disavow violence.
That's the funniest thing is, like, Ethan is not a political commentator. He's not. He's a drama goon who dabbles, and he knows more about Mandela's philosophy on violence than Hasan does. Like, he's so dense. Like, how embarrassing. Me, that's probably like the funniest Hasan clip I've ever seen. It's just the combination of ignorance and smugness and like, oh God. When I saw Hasan tweet that at first about violence, I thought Ethan had like said something. I thought Ethan had said Mandela opposed violence. He just did sabotage, which is stupid. Obviously, sabotage is violence. I thought Ethan had done something like that, or just tried to say that Mandela was non-violent. I didn't know that Ethan actually said the perfectly correct statement about Mandela. Oh, God. The drunken master owning Hasan without even fucking addressing.
The drunken master of debate strikes again.
Thanks for the $20, Dwayne. That is so funny, man. Like the transcendental drunken master. I'm sorry. I know there are Hasan fans watching. You should be embarrassed. Like, I know you're not, because it's all team sports and you don't actually care about any of this, but like, how can you have, like, it's not even that it's like an honest mistake. People make that all the time. I don't care about honest mistakes. People put their foot in their mouth a lot. This is like smug, self-assured, jumping in mid-sentence because of a buzzword and being completely wrong. He doesn't know anything. He's spoken about Mandela and Hamas for over a year now. He doesn't seem to know anything about either of them. And then the replies when I was tweeting about this were just so predictable, because people who support this comparison will try to say like, oh, you know, well, people did die, you know, like MK did kill people. And it's like, okay, well, what did the ANC actually say about that, though? They apologized for those killings and they attributed it to bad training and rogue actors. People will say that Nelson Mandela's wife, Winnie, set people on fire. She did, necklacing. You douse a tire in gasoline and put it over someone's chest and arms, set them on fire. They did that to mostly non-whites, like people who they thought were collaborators, but also the ANC denounced it. They denounced necklacing. And also, it doesn't negate the general policy of the ANC being about infrastructure, not targeting people. The fact that they necklace some of their own people doesn't mean that doesn't change their stance on South African violence. The ANC did fight militarily against soldiers, but that was largely in like Rhodesia. They fought against the Rhodesian army and also fought South African soldiers there. But domestically, within South Africa, yeah, they generally avoided targeting civilians. Or people will try to say like, oh, Nelson Mandela's son supports Hamas. Or the ANC currently supports Hamas. Or this, it's like, again, change in strategy to embrace violence as a tactical choice. This is what, saying didn't finish the article. This is a lie. This person's just lying. Like, this is them going from non-violence to targeting infrastructure. They've got the article back to front. This isn't about bombing bars and killing people. This is not about that. This person's just, they've read the article backwards, I guess. Sorry, just because Winnie Mandela like supported necklacing does not mean the general strategy of the ANC was the same as Hamas. It wasn't. It wasn't even close. And that's actually, if these people would pay some attention to that, they would know. They'd probably be aware of why Hamas failed. But they don't. They don't want to learn. They don't want to learn from the mistakes of the past. Also, bonus meme, Nelson Mandela. Bonus meme.
Do that. As far as Yasser Arafat is concerned, I explained to Mr. Sidney that we identify with the PLO because just like ourselves, they are fighting for the right of self-determination.
Yeah, so far so good. Remember, this is after the PLO denounced terror. Well, this is after Arafat denounced terrorism and wanted to opt for a two-state solution. This is where Arafat was in 1990.
I went further, however, to say that the support for Yasser Arafat in his struggle does not mean that the ANC has ever doubted the right of Israel.
Oh my God.
To exist as a state legally.
Sorry, we need to try that one again.
With the PLO. Because
okay. Here it comes, guys.
I went further, however, to say that the support for Yasser Arafat in his struggle does not mean that the ANC has ever doubted the right of Israel to exist as a state legally.
Oh my God. Zionist Mandela. We love it. We love it. Okay.
That's something he said.
Yeah, MLK was the same on Israel's right to exist. Yeah.
I think you could say that tactically speaking, listen,
by the way, Sam, in the totality of their campaign, I think under 200 civilians died. And the people who did kill civilians were almost all held accountable
for
what they did. That's a difference, Sam.
Well, I mean, I can.
Damn, Ethan just out of nowhere with some knowledge on the ANC in South Africa. Interesting.
Civilians died. And the people who did kill civilians were almost all held accountable for what they did. That's a difference, Sam.
Well, I mean, I
held accountable is probably not the best way to put it, like, because obviously Truth and Reconciliation was more about pursuing like reparation than justice. But most of the attacks that resulted in killing civilians, or especially ones that targeted them, were they were disowned by the ANC. Yeah, they did disown those attacks. Sometimes it took longer. Sometimes they would have to equivocate before claiming responsibility and being like, yeah, sorry, but they did. Even in a lot of cases, whilst the fighting was still ongoing.
I can tell you that
a significant difference.
Well, it is a significant difference. I mean, I imagine many of those people who committed atrocities on October 7th are dead now.
What the fuck, man? Held account. The difference is the ANC holding their own accountable versus what, Hamas getting held accountable because Israel bombed them. There's no critical thought. What the is happening between these ears to make you come out with something like that? Did you know that the ANC, when they did have rogue elements, the movement denounced them and often held people accountable for their attacks? Yeah, but Hamas got held accountable as well because Israel bombed them. That's not the same thing, Sam.
And so
what does that have to do with anything?
Well, that's accountability.
But I mean being held.
Yeah, come on, Ethan.
That's accountability.
But I mean being held accountable by the party that they're presumably doing the violence on behalf.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, but you're saying the entire ANC was held accountable?
No, I was saying
no. They held their own accountable for breaking with. Fuck me. He's lost. He doesn't. I think the only thing Sam Seder knew about the ANC was that America called them terrorists. That might be he's out of his depth. What the seasoned political comment, bro.
Nelson Mandela's party, if someone killed a civilian, they would hold them accountable. They would charge them. They would disavow their actions.
The ANC did.
Yes.
Well, the IRA was bombing places in England and throughout Ireland. I mean,
how do you hold someone accountable when they're dead? Look at this. Doodlescape is pivoting now. They're embarrassed by Hasan and Sam Seder, so they've shifted sides. I think like the accountability there is that you're dead, right? Like you can't do it again. It's some people support the death penalty, I guess. I no longer support the Mandela. Oh God.
We have even the Irgun or the Stern gang when they killed over 100 villagers in 1948. I mean,
okay. First of all, they killed a lot more than 100 villagers. The Irgun and the Lehi. They also did it in the 30s in the Arab Revolt. But okay. Why would you bring up the Irgun and the Lehi? No one likes the Irgun and Lehi, apart from like Yishai Fleischer and Ben Gvir. No one in my community likes the Irgun and Lehi. Like, why would you bring them in? They're bad. They're like bad terrorists. Yeah, they're terrorists that were bad because they killed civilians. They targeted civilians. They're bad.
History is full of examples of organizations that commit terrorist acts.
Now, I will tell
you, Haganah held them accountable. Well, I mean, they sank a ship and they hunted a few of them down, and then the rest of them were like they forced to be assimilated into the IDF. Yeah, I don't know how many of them were held accountable. Like literally, the leader of the Irgun and the leader of the Lehi both became prime ministers. So I mean, Begin became a prime minister. Yitzhak Shamir became a prime minister. But at their time, they weren't like the most prominent groups. The Lehi was like 300 people. The Irgun was about 1,000. So, yeah.
People look at South Africa.
I do not condone the killing of civilians, which is why Loner and Ethan act as if Sam's ignorance on the ANC is a gotcha
on the wider point. It is absolutely a gotcha on the wider point. These guys downplay Hamas's actions. They try to compare them. These people try to legitimize elements of what Hamas does militarily or like their goals. Yes, they do. By comparing them to liberation movements that were clever and successful. Yeah, they do actually. Yeah, that is actually it's a big failure. Yes. I'm sorry, if this happened to me, my God, can you imagine if Ethan had actually said, no, Mandela was just nonviolent. He didn't do anything. He just picketed. He would get crucified. That's why Hasan was so horny, because he thought he caught Ethan saying something wrong about Mandela, even though what Ethan said was 100% correct. But that's the thing, you know, when you're part of a team, like, I guess, especially a very extreme team, then the disinformation doesn't really matter.
Obviously, I'm upset about what Israel is doing.
Sure. The part that I don't like about people say, like, I feel like people sweep for Hamas by saying, like, what do you expect, right? But the truth is that people use South Africa as an example, but what South Africa shows is that you don't need to commit a violent war against civilians to liberate yourself.
Whoa.
Well, I mean, listen, we had for a year, we had the Great March of Return, where, you know, Sinwar himself was involved in that. There was Palestinians marching.
Wait, what did he say? How is he going to describe the March of Return as this is apparently Palestinians doing peaceful action? Oh my God.
We had the Great March of Return, where, you know, Sinwar himself was involved in that. There was
Sinwar himself. What was Sinwar saying during the March of Return? Is he going to recall? I want to hear him describe it first. Sinwar. Why would you mention Sinwar being involved? If you know what Sinwar was doing at the March of Return, you would not bring that up. Okay.
Palestinians marching on a regular basis over the course of the year. I don't know how many it was, 50 or whatever.
One a week,
that were innocent people who went there, and snipers are shooting down unarmed civilians. And so, you know, time and time again, and over the course of the 20 years that I've been professionally, you know, covering this, my attitude towards Israel's willingness to have peace has changed. And
the Great March of Return was not a peace overture. Okay, they were literally protesting for refugees' rights to return to Israel, like, which also would mean that if, like, the Palestinian refugees got their right of return, like the full right of return to Israel, there would be no Israel. It would just become an Arab state from the rivers of the sea. That was it. Second of all, they were trying to break down the border fence and infiltrate communities. That's what they were trying to do. That was what they literally, and we know this because even the UN Human Rights Report, which was very biased and left out of important information, even they, like, we know from their report that there were literally Facebook groups set up dividing people into tire throwing units or stone throwing units or fence cutting units, burning tires, like because the whole point, Molotov cocktail units, because the whole point was to obscure the view of the people guarding the border fence and to get people forward so they could break through the fence and enter into Israeli communities. They had maps saying, here's how you get to Kibbutz Kfar Aza, or that was the goal. That's what they were doing. And Sam should know that because he mentioned that Sinwar was there as if this is like an example of a peaceful endeavor. This is what Sinwar was saying at the March of Return on week 2, by the way, the second protest. Oh,
خرجنا اليوم وسنخرج على مدار الأيام القادمة وسيفاجئ شعبنا وشبابنا وسيفاجئ شبابنا العالم كله بما في جعبته ولينتظروا زحفنا الكبير سنقتلع الحدود وسنقتلع قلوبهم.
With their rhetoric, it sounds like the March of Return is Sharpeville. Well, like an actually fully peaceful protest that was, I think, against a curfew or something. You're just peacefully protesting without a curfew and then all getting shot. Yeah, that's not what this was. So he's saying, we have come out today and we will come out also in the next few days. Our people and our boys will surprise the entire world with what they have in store. Let them wait for our big push. We will take down the border and we will tear out their hearts from their bodies. And that's what they did. So the problem is with the March of Return, the intent of the protest was peaceful. The civilian organizers of the March of Return wanted it to be peaceful. They wanted, the way Gaza works is you've got the Gaza Strip, and between the border and the civilian population, you have a road. And I think along the side, it's like this, but here, this road that separates, that's the last road surrounding Gaza before the buffer zone. Sorry, I'm over the screen. You have a road here called the Jakar Road, and on the other side of this side of the road, you've got Gaza. The other side of the road, you have the buffer zone. Okay? And in that buffer zone, that's the no-go area. And if you go there, you might get a warning shot fired at you. And if you keep going forwards, that you might get shot. Like that's how it goes there. Because this is an armistice line. The Gaza border is an armistice line with two sides of an armed conflict on the other side. That's how that goes. And a minority of these protesters, even though albeit it was still a few thousand of them out of tens of thousands of protesters, decided on the first day of the March of Return to cross over the wrong side of the road and march towards the fence. Some people threw rocks, some people slingshotted rocks towards the soldiers, some people were trying to cut through the fence, some people were burning tires to let the other people run closer. Some people were planting flags, which people had fears of the flags having IEDs attached to them because that had been the case a few weeks prior to the march. And then that's the environment in where people got shot. People were not getting shot because a bunch of people just stood on the safe side of the road and had snacks and did music festivals and stuff like that. That's not why the shooting started. The shooting started because of a minority of people who were actually predominantly Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Al-Aqsa Martyrs, DFLP. That's why the shooting started. Now, you could argue quite easily that a lot of people who got shot there did not deserve to die. They did not deserve to get shot. There was a lot of trigger-happy behavior. There were a lot of people who you can see clearly got shot when they were on the right side of the road, not doing anything. You can also see some people who were approaching when it looked like quite clearly more effective crowd control could be used as opposed to just shoot them. Timon, I'm really sorry that you think going up to a fence is not a reason to be shot. Yeah, going up to any random fence is not a reason to be shot. Now, maybe this is my problem. Maybe it's because I've actually been to Lebanon and I've been to Israel. I've been to both sides of that border. When I was 13 in South Lebanon, okay, no one had to explain to me not to go up to the border and start throwing shit at the soldiers. No one had to tell me that would be a bad idea, okay? Because I knew, even at that time, that if I did that, I might get shot. Same thing with the Syrian soldiers who were occupying the country, right? Like I knew as well. My dad has a thing where when Syria was occupying Lebanon is like when we were driving and if we'd see a bad driver, he'd be like, oh, bloody Syrians. Like he would just say they were all Syrians, right? So, and I knew not to make jokes like that in Lebanon when there are Syrian soldiers with guns running around, okay? It's just like, you're not supposed to do that. You don't even do that in your own country. Try walking into Area 51 and throwing rocks at the military. Like me. Jesus.
My understanding of it has changed, and I can only imagine how more intense that feeling is to be living in a place that is, functionally like, the Warsaw Ghetto, insofar as like you don't have access to resources, you have 50% unemployment.
Okay, so I don't know what they taught Sam and he went to Hebrew school and learned a third of it was about the Holocaust. The Warsaw Ghetto. The Warsaw Ghetto's problem was not 50% unemployment and border restrictions, okay? The Warsaw Ghetto, and this is how you do it, okay? It's very easy. You can just go look, a little Holocaust encyclopedia here. It's a very short article, okay? If you just want to get the basics, you don't want to read books or anything.
Like the reality of the situation discounts one side. There's lots of terrible things happening all around, but people act like acknowledging it would mean their side has no argument.
Thanks for the $10, Dwayne. The Warsaw Ghetto was established and sealed off in the late 1940. That's when it sealed off. Established a month earlier. Its population is about 400,000. By mid-1943, early to mid-1943, so like just about 2.5 years, in about 2.5 years, the remaining population in the Warsaw Ghetto is about 35,000. Okay? So in 2.5 years, 80-something thousand people die of starvation and related diseases. Over 250,000 people are taken out of the ghetto, put in a train, taken to Treblinka, a killing center, a death camp, and gassed. Just like in one door, on the train, out into the chamber. And about 30 or 40, 50,000 of them are shot. Something like that. So I'm just saying, the Warsaw Ghetto is not like Gaza. And this is also not even to mention that in the Warsaw Ghetto, how did the Warsaw Ghetto come to be the way it was? Well, the Nazis invaded Poland for territory, and then they hated Jews, so they rammed them all into a ghetto. There was no military base. There were not tunnels and booby traps in every building in the Warsaw Ghetto or every other building. Like the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto were not sworn to destroy Germany through a war of attrition, right? That was actually the pretext that Hitler invented for doing what he did to the Jews. I'm sorry. It's just like, what this comparison is insane. It's insane. 80,000 between 1940. Remember, between 1940, it's like November 1940. You're talking like less than 2.5 years. 83,000 dying of starvation and disease. The Germans, as a matter of policy, set the food rations to 181 a day per person. Stop comparing Gaza to the Warsaw Ghetto. Stop. And when the uprising happened in the Warsaw Ghetto, it happened not against civilians. They didn't break out and go and kill random Germans. They killed the soldiers and the police officers who were trying to take them to a death camp. That's who they were fighting with. It's not the same. It's not the same.
Apartheid that is taking place in terms of the West Bank. I mean,
I agree with those characterizations, by the way, Sam. Just to say,
but I can't imagine that my response wouldn't be to pick up a weapon.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know.
It's not really working out.
Well, none of it's working out, is it? I mean,
not much at all. Not really much at all.
It's called the greatest attack on Israelis in 70.
Also, again, yeah, it didn't work. If you're going to say this, like it's just like a matter of self-preservation or dignity or whatever, that Gazans had to pick up weapons and attack Israel, like a sovereign state, by the way, under international law, by the way, a sovereign state with the right to defend itself. How does Sam factor in the protests then? The fact that, like, to this day, it hasn't stopped. It's been over a month now. You've got thousands of people coming out every day, saying that they want Hamas to leave because Hamas are, and they use the same rhetoric over and over again. The rhetoric they use is Hamas is gambling with our blood. They're dealing with our blood. As in, like, they understand that Hamas is literally sacrificing them on the altar of bad PR for Israel. Like that, they know that Hamas is doing that to them. They're the ones saying that we want white flags, not guns. How does that factor in? The difference is that white flags might actually save Gazans from getting bombed. Like, it's very likely to, right? It's not likely that Israel's going to bomb Gaza if the entire population is just like, okay, stop. We're not fighting anymore. Stop, please. Here's the hostages back. Hamas is gone. Like, we're not getting ruled by Hamas anymore. We're not going to try to destroy your country. Generally, that works. Usually. Syria is like the exception that proves the rule, I think. That's how I'd put it. The Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto could not do anything to avoid getting gassed, apart from take out a few soldiers on the way. There was nothing they could have done. No decision they could have ever made would have got them out of that situation, other than fighting your way out and escaping. I don't get the Syria comment. Jelani does not want to fight with Israel, but Israel seems very intent on snatching land from Syria. But that's not the norm. And you can argue it's because of, like, the pretext is that, like, Syria is quite unstable and could fall into the hands of, like, security threats or whatever. But no, like, Israel's actions in Syria are completely unjustified. But
5 years, the notion of Zionism and the way that Israel is organized as a society.
So Daniela Weiss would stop if Gazans surrendered. Okay. Daniela Weiss probably wouldn't be in a position where the IDF is able to take her into Gaza to survey the place for settlement if Gazans surrendered. No. And we know this because we know why Netanyahu failed. Netanyahu failed because he thought that Hamas could be kept quiet with some concessions by broadening the rights to the water by expanding the buffer zone by like a few nautical miles so that Gazans had more access to fishing water and stuff like that. They thought that by allowing more humanitarian aid into Gaza would help, which they were doing as well, especially after COVID. They thought by extending work permits would help Gaza's GDP, and that might keep Hamas quiet. They thought that Qatari money would keep Hamas quiet. They thought that they could have a relatively diminished security presence on the border because Hamas were more interested in internal affairs. That's what they thought. And Sinwar convinced them of that. That's why, before October 7th, the IDF did not have a protocol ready to go and launch into Gaza to do a ground invasion. The most they were prepared for was a border crossing of 70 people, breaking the border at about 7 points. That's the most that the IDF had preparations for. So there's been no evidence at all that there's been no indication at all that like the IDF had any plans beyond that, because they weren't expecting Hamas to do anything. Hamas made that decision. So you can say history didn't start on October 7th, and I'm happy that you've told me that for the first time. But the fact is that in history, when we look at turning points, we look at underlying reasons and we look at triggering points. The triggering point in October 7th was in the hands of Hamas. They had that decision. They had the power not to make it, but they chose to make it. They didn't have to. No one forced them to. They did it anyway. They knew what Israel's response would be. They knew that all their military infrastructure was embedded in civilian infrastructure. They knew a lot of their own people would probably die. They did it anyway. It's not a good strategy. I don't know.
Society is not protecting Jews.
Well,
it's not protecting Israelis. It's not protecting Jews worldwide. It is, there may have been a time where Zionism had and there were certainly proponents of Zionism in the early 20th century, in the late, perhaps late 19th century, where there was a notion of a multi-ethnic democracy that fell by the wayside. Folks like Hannah Arendt and Einstein, left the Zionist Congress, and what it has evolved into is, I think, a nightmare for everyone involved. And so, I don't know how I would react in that type of miseration, frankly.
Well, can I ask you?
But again, Ehud Barak said that.
You believe this still doesn't justify the extent of Israel's action in Gaza, right? Yeah, of course. Yeah. Despite what some of my critics say, I've been kind of saying that the war should have ended a long time ago. Yeah. I was at the same time when Gallant, and not even Gallant, it was American intel around like last summer, when maybe like more like August, September, some period around then, when people were saying, it was very clear that American intel and other people had said that Israel had achieved most of what they had to militarily against Hamas. Like they were in a position where they could start pursuing more limited and much more controlled actions against Hamas. And in the meantime, they could start making deals with the rest of the Arab world to focus on establishing an alternative governance area in Gaza, in a place that is run neither by Israel nor by Hamas. Somewhere like maybe not a PLO coalition because Netanyahu hates them, but like, no, it should have been. Yeah, it should have been like a coalition of PLO and like Egyptians or maybe Saudis. Yeah, I think they should have moved on to that phase a long time ago. This whole like forever whack-a-mole does not seem to be the best approach. And it's also especially not good because now we're in a position, Turks. Now we're in a position where you actually have protesters in Gaza against Hamas. Like, can you imagine what it would be like if there was like a couple of zones in Gaza that had been fully cleared of Hamas and like all the tunnels dismantled and like there was actually room to start a rebuilding project and there was like a screening operation to allow civilians back in there? Can you imagine if like those protesters actually had a part of Gaza that they could go to where they have to, like, for at least for a long period, just not have to deal with the IDF bombing them and also not have to deal with Hamas? Can you imagine if that was there? Like even just like in Beit Lahia, right? Like in the northern corner or somewhere like even in Rafah. Can you imagine if they'd done that? Like it would be so different. And Hamas would be so if that was the case. But, I think they are starting that now. But again, it's like my hopes aren't high. They've tried that in the past and it didn't, like, people just were not interested in it.
That he would pick up a weapon were he one of them. And
that's fine.
He's far closer to the conflict than I am.
I'm not saying I don't understand why people pick up weapons. Right.
They need leaders, right? They need leaders. Yeah, if you live in Gaza, you're going to be mad and you're going to want to kill Jews, Israelis, whatever. Yeah, you're going to want to do that. But you need leaders. You need leaders who are going to give you some kind of direction to actually better your position in the world as much as they can. And I would probably argue that October 7th was not an example of that. That was an example of bad leaders making bad decisions and their own people. And as long as Hamas keeps fighting, that they're still doing it. By the way, anniversary of October 7th, 2024. Khaled Mashal saying that Hamas's losses are tactical. Memory. Yes, let's go. Oh yeah, if you're mad about me using memory, just tell me where the translation's wrong. Otherwise, cope. Okay, Mangrave, you know for a fact I didn't say shooting people just for approaching a fence. You know I didn't say that. I don't know why you think you can get away with mischaracterizing me like that. Like when I'm live and people can rewind the stream and talk about what I was actually saying. Like, you know, the trying to infiltrate and fighting with soldiers part is probably a bit more crucial. But, you know, I don't know why you do that. Why? Do that in a YouTube video essay if you want to mischaracterize me, okay? You'll get lots of support for it.
خسائرنا تكتيكية وخسائر عدونا استراتيجية. هذه حقيقة. خسائرنا تكتيكية، آلام والموت شهادة، ونتألم، ولكن كل ذلك في سبيل الله. نحن اليوم نضحي بأشياء غالية علينا، مؤلمة لنا، ولكن إن شاء الله من وراها أفق عظيم. أما عدونا فخسائره استراتيجية. العدو الآن يفقد مساره الاستراتيجي ويعجل نهايته المحتومة إلى الفناء والزوال، وخسر على كل الصعد. ثم إن الأثمان الباهظة دفعتها كل الشعوب المسلمة وغير المسلمة عبر التاريخ. جبهة مقاومة شاركتنا مشكورة كما أشرت. اليوم مطلوب من قوى الأمة، بقية الأمة، أن تفعل أمرين: أن تفتح جبهات جديدة للمقاومة، هذا واجب الجهاد. والأمر الثاني أن نفتح جبهات أخرى على صعيد السياسة والقانون وملاحقة هذا الكيان على الساحة الدولية. الجهاد بالمال عظيم، لكنه لم يعد يكفي، ليس كافيا. نريد جهادا بالنفس والسلاح، وأن نفتح جبهات إضافية أخرى. هو يقاتلنا العدو في كل مكان.
So the gist of what he's saying here is that, like, when Palestinians lose, like when they suffer losses, civilian losses, like human losses of entire families, when kids get mutilated and then their pictures are broadcast on the TV, like this, to him, this is tactical, okay? It's tactical because it's a sacrifice that is being made to undermine Israel. So yeah, that's what he's saying. Like what he's saying is that the value of this still happening is that Israel is getting lamped on the world stage by the ICC, by international community, by Americans, like Europeans. That's the purpose. Like, so it's logical. It's logical. Like it's got a logical conclusion. If you believe that your people are worth sacrificing for this cause, and you want to turn Israel into a pariah and like ruin their reputation on the world stage, and hopefully that will lead to their annihilation, it's logical. Like it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. Like it's just that it's just not good. It's just not a good idea. For one, it won't destroy Israel, and two, you're getting your own people killed for no good reason. Like, yeah.
Right. So let me ask you this: what do you think about October 7th attack?
What do I think about it?
Yeah,
I mean, it was horrific.
Mm-hmm. And this was like a military action by Hamas to what end?
I mean, I suspect. I mean, I don't know what the strategy was. I mean, they attacked 2 military bases. I don't know if they were aware of that.
Why would you characterize it in that way? Why would you characterize it that way?
Yeah, the Nova.
Why would you? I don't know. They attack military bases, bro. Why do you not know, Sam? You've been commentating on this for over 16, 17 months. How do you not know? You know, like Hamas, they speak. They're yappers. You can see what they say all the time, bro. You know that, like, we've got captured documents that have been reviewed by the international press from Gaza. Also, they didn't hit 2 military bases. They hit like 45, but we'll get to that. Hang on. Military outposts. 1 second. No SWAT. Okay. What did Hamas want? That's a good question. Hang on. What amps are those? There's 1 amp and it's a Vox. That's just a box for my monitors. Hang on here. This is from Hamas's documents, like minutes where they were trying to get Iran involved. I don't know why Sam would say he doesn't know what Hamas wanted to do. They say, at this point, preparations for the attack were roughly a month from completion, according to the June 2022 minutes. The plans included striking 46 positions staffed by the Israeli military division that guards the border, then targeting a major airbase and an intelligence hub in southern Israel, as well as cities and villages. The leaders said it would be easier to target those residential areas if the military bases were overrun first, a prediction that proved to be correct on October 7th. When people say like Hamas they had a good civilian to militant kill rate because they killed like 300 or 400 soldiers, the problem with that is that it doesn't tell you about the intent. The reason they targeted military bases was because they were the obstacles to the civilian communities. Like they had to go through the military to get to the civilian areas because Gaza has military and then civilian after the border. So that's one thing. First, I don't know why it was 46 military positions, not 2 or 3. He's going to say also that they didn't know about the Nova Festival. Again, why is he doing that? Like he knows that he should know that the objective was to kill civilians and take hostages. It was both. But I don't know why he would say that. Why? They targeted kibbutzim to the point where they actually knew where the armory is, because like Israel has this policy where if you're in the kibbutz, you have to store your weapons in an armory that's locked so that people can access it only if they need to. And that meant that Hamas fighters would go paraglide onto a rooftop and they would shoot at the door of the armory to stop people from defending the village. That's what they would do. The Nova Festival, there's a video that Hamas actually published themselves of their soldiers arriving at the festival, seeing it's there, being like, and saying it's their lucky day. Yeah, they didn't know it was going to be there. I don't think there's any evidence that they knew that. But when it was there, when they found it, they took the opportunity to murder a bunch of civilians. Like, what the? Could they just not help themselves? Like, what's the implication there?
That the dance.
The Nova rave.
Yeah, I don't know if they knew that rave was happening. I suspect it was to derail the Abraham Accords, which were going to leave the Palestinians out of the equation, where an authoritarian
you leave out that they
state.
attacked kibbutzim, by the way.
No, yes, of course they did. But I'm saying that they.
Oh, so he knows, but why did you not say? So this is what's really annoying. It's like, if I had only listened to someone like Sam Seder or like any of these people talking about the war the last 17 months, the problem with the way these guys commentate on the war is that you wouldn't even know from listening to them, you wouldn't actually know that Hamas really existed. Like you'd barely know anything about what they do, about what they say, because they're just like, it's like every other day. It's like Israel bombs Gaza, 100 people dead. Israel bombs Gaza, 50 people dead. They don't tell you which ones were militants. They don't tell you like what any kind of, saying, they're bombing a university. Well, you don't say, well, who controlled that university? What was it being used for? Were the classes in session, like in the middle of a war? Or what? Why were they? But they don't tell you that. They don't tell you anything about that. You wouldn't know about all the booby traps and the tunnels and the fact that Hamas will literally tell people to stay put when Israel tells them to evacuate. You wouldn't know about any of that. They're just like some Palestinian, they're just like some kind of passive entity. And then obviously this results in Sam not knowing why Hamas did October 7th. Like there are two, based on Hamas's words, there are two plausible explanations for why they did October 7th. One is, as is shown by these minutes and also by Sinwar's speeches over the years, is that they might have actually thought, and there's a lot of evidence from Sinwar, they might have actually thought that they would succeed. They would go all the way, because they did ask, they didn't specify the operation, but they did ask Iran and Hezbollah for help. They did seem to expect that. And when Sinwar has given speeches talking about a potential attack on Israel, he said that he would expect half of the Palestinian Israelis, 1 million people, to rise up with them, to run people over with their cars or to stab people. Or he expected the West Bank to rise up. He expected Lebanon and the Houthis to rise up. He expected like a full-on, from all ends, all at once. Was he delusional? Probably. I think if that had happened, if like there was 1 million Palestinian Israelis, if the West Bank rose up, if Hezbollah emptied their rocket arsenal, like unloaded, if Iran unloaded, if the Houthis unloaded, all at the same time as October 7th, I feel like Israel would be like, they'd be really, really, they would be in such a horrible position if that all happened at once. But Sinwar being delusional might have been one reason. The other reason, we just watched it with Mashal. Now that we know that they weren't going to destroy Israel militarily, we know that the other reason for them keeping going is because the Israeli response is turning other countries in the world against Israel. Because the more Palestinians die, the weaker Israel gets internationally. And Mashal seems to believe, or says, that that is speeding up Israel's annihilation. So those are the two reasons. One, because they thought they might have gotten more help than they did. And two, because they expected the military campaign to undermine Israel like more long term in the propaganda war. I think as far as the primary reason, it was over Al-Aqsa. It wasn't over the Abraham Accords as far as we know. But anyway, played a role for sure.
I don't know what the strategy was on their part.
So what do you think, like, would you expect the response of Israel would be to that?
I had no doubt on that day that Israel was going to respond.
Go insane. Yeah, right. It was going to be horrific. We all knew.
Yes, but I think I think the lack of proportionality was just beyond. Frankly, and I was aware that this was going to be a horror show, but I don't think I had the level of awareness of what they would do to go in and literally level it, destroy what is it, 80-90% of the structures in Palestine, bomb hospitals, that they would use.
Well, Hamas did know that because that's why they attacked.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but if you think Israel is as bad as Hamas thinks Israel is, then yeah, you would expect that. Again, I don't understand this. Israel's genocidal. I don't think Sam is saying proportionality in terms of like rules of war. I don't think he's saying that. You can still argue the strikes are disproportionate legally, though. Of course, quite a lot of them seem to be. Like the Where's Daddy program and like that. Like, yeah, I don't know. Like that doesn't seem like a very proportionate thing to bomb an entire family home of like 20 or 30 people to get some low-level official. It seems a bit mental. Bit of doublespeak, maybe. Okay.
Food as a weapon.
I'm more interested in like the justification for what they're doing.
Probably took hostages with the idea that they would be able to negotiate.
I understand why they took hostages. I don't understand why they took children and elderly.
I believe that they probably. I mean, this is all conjecture on my part. That they would be able to trade them as a way to inhibit Israel's doing what they're doing, and I don't know if they could have even imagined that. I'm not going to. I'm not going to endorse Hamas's.
Why does he? How can you spend so long talking about this conflict but not know anything about one side of the conflict? Hamas is one side of this conflict. They are party to this conflict. They have not surrendered. They're still chugging away. Every ceasefire they've ever asked for has been like at most a 5 or 10 year truce. The only ceasefire Hamas has asked for is one where they get to rebuild and try again later. That's the only kind of ceasefire Hamas has ever really asked for. What? I don't know, man. It's a very bizarre situation.
Strategy here.
Well, I'm just trying to flesh it out here because this is what I'm getting to is Hamas. I think they knew that this was the reaction that would happen. You know?
I can't imagine that they assume that there would be this level of destruction.
I mean, that's why they hate Israel. I don't think they underestimate how violent the IDF can be. You know what I mean? That's why they attacked.
I certainly underestimated that they would go this far. Use
I didn't think they'd go this far, but
bomb hospitals and shoot EMTs and have rules of engagement like this. I mean, and I think Hamas is certainly up to.
We're talking about the same country that invaded and rammed the out of Lebanon over 2 kidnapped soldiers. What the? Oh, I have no idea what they were doing about an operation where they kill over more Jews in one day than have been killed since the Holocaust, and then also take 250 holidays. I have no idea. Like, you know who does know? Do you know who does know what would happen? No, not this. Not this person. Oh, I got the wrong thing. It is this person, but it's the wrong clip. Yeah, sorry. Do you know who does know? Here's who does know. React again so the clip isn't ruined. Hang on.
To, have rules of engagement like this. I mean, and, I think Hamas is certainly up to criticism for their strategy here.
If that's an understatement.
Well, I mean, if that's well,
I mean, they're a terrorist organization that intentionally antagonized like the IDF to come mass slaughter their civilians.
I think that if they overestimated whether Israel cared about the hostages, without a doubt. I mean, there's I don't know that there would be anybody who would make a case that this is what was their plan. Have Israel respond in this way. That's absurd.
Well, and
the same country that literally invaded Lebanon over 2 kidnapped soldiers. They bombed the absolute out of that country for 34 days over 2 kidnapped soldiers. Do you know who does know? Yeah. Who does know what kind of thing Israel might have gone up to if Hamas launched an operation like this? This guy knows.
أضعاف مضاعفة مما دكت به في عام 2014 وغيرها من المدن أيضا. أعيد وأكرر لولا دعم إيران للمقاومة في فلسطين لما امتلكت والخبرات. لدينا مئات تحت الأرض.
Yeah, this is him talking to Al Jazeera journalists, by the way.
لدينا مئات كثيرة من غرف التحكم والسيطرة والقيادة. لدينا مئات وآلاف الكمائن التي لو فكر العدو أن يدخل إلى قطاع غزة فسيخرج له أبناؤنا ستخرجون له أنتم وإخوانكم من باطن الأرض ستتفتق الأرض.
Yeah, Sinwar says youth quite a lot. They have a whole thing about like encouraging youths to fight.
برجالنا بشبابنا يخرجون لدباباتهم من باطن الأرض المضادة للضروع التي صنعت في قطاع غزة. اليوم لدينا بفضل الله سبحانه وتعالى وبتصنيع من شباب غزة الآلاف من هذه المضادات.
I couldn't say they'd possibly have any idea that Israel would want to do a ground operation in Gaza to try and take out Hamas. You know, that must be why they built 400 miles of tunnels, 500 kilometers of tunnels, and booby-trapped thousands of buildings. Why would they do that? I have no idea what they would expect after October 7th. Come on, man. He knew.
لدينا اليوم بفضل الله سبحانه وتعالى الآلاف المؤلفة من القذائف الصاروخية التي ستحيل مدن الاحتلال.
Oh yeah, just to get back to that thing about youth, by the way, when he's talking about the youths, this is Great March of Return again. This is Ismail Haniyeh, leader of Hamas at the time, rewarding what seems to be like a prepubescent, like a 10-year-old, maybe even younger, for wearing an onion mask, which is supposed to neutralize tear gas, I guess, and participating in the March of Return, like marching towards the fence, to joining people who are fighting with soldiers. They gave him a little key and everything. This is from the first day, because this was 4th of April. The first march was the 30th of March, and they were weekly. So this would have been after the first protest. But they're encouraging this shit, man. They love it.
Same is true of, like, I guess Israelis feel the same way. Like, it was totally unprecedented. You know what happened. So maybe they didn't think that their mission would be as successful as it was. On the other hand,
I have no doubt that they did not think that they would that they would have been able to overrun that. I mean, I think we were told that the technology of Israel's fence, et cetera, was perfect and something we should emulate in this country. I mean, Trump was all talking about that. So I have no doubt that Hamas overestimated
overestimated the IDF. Yeah, I got you.
What they would be able to, what kind of destruction.
This part's actually true from Sam. This was in the IDF internal probe as well. That they did think that the technology of the fence would kind of like do the job for them, but obviously Hamas had learned, very, very cleverly as well, actually, like in an ingenious way, they figured out how to angle like the flights of their drones all in unison to blind the security cameras at the border. Yeah, they actually did know that.
And they
figured it out.
And they underestimated the violence that Israel would perpetrate on Gaza. I don't know that anyone could have imagined that Israel
if they underestimate the violence of Israel, then why didn't they surrender? Why didn't they stop? Why didn't they hand over the hostages and give up power? They have never offered to do both. Release the hostages, give up your power, give up arms. That's what they would have to do. That's again, for a group that did what Hamas did, it's not too unreasonable to ask for. But
would have engaged in this level of destruction and immiseration and bombing churches and bombing hospitals and blowing up universities and destroying the infrastructure. I mean, it's almost beyond belief.
So one thing that when I was talking to Hasan, and I'm just going to talk about his point. This is about him personally. When I asked him, because this is obviously the $1 million question, right? By the way, just there's not one public bomb shelter in Gaza.
There's not one public bomb shelter in Gaza?
Mm-mm.
Oh no.
Okay.
I just think that's interesting. It's pretty up, don't you think?
Do I think it's up?
Yeah.
I'm not.
People will say like, "Oh, but Israeli bombs, they'll just destroy the bomb shelter." It's like, no, the point of a bomb shelter is if there's a target next to you, you go in the bomb shelter, and the target gets destroyed, but you're fine. Like, you survive. That's the point of a bomb shelter. But okay.
I'm not sure I understand the point. Like,
well, I mean,
do you think anything would be standing anymore?
Well, bomb shelters are underground. I mean,
hey,
they would definitely be a lot
I've
safer.
seen what happened to tunnels under hospitals.
Your statement is, there was. So you say there were tunnels under hospitals.
Israel built the ones under the first one that they went into. They built it when they were occupying Gaza.
First of all, Shifa wasn't the first hospital they went into. Second of all, Israel did not build the tunnels. They built a basement. They built a cellar. We know this because look at the difference. We can see them both. You can look at them. Mate, couldn't you call those tunnels bomb shelters? Yeah, but the tunnels aren't public. I don't think it's been shown ever that civilians have been allowed to use those tunnels as shelters. The tunnels are for the military and the hostages. France 24 did a whole investigation on this. They geolocated the tunnel and the cellar to show that they were different. They were in different locations. The entrances were in different places. Look, by the way, there is a photo. There's a picture of the cellar. That's it. This is the cellar. By the way, look at it. That's the cellar, okay, that Israel built. You see that? That's the layout of it. And they do the whole thing, like they geolocate where the entrances were versus like the tunnel versus the basement. They're in different places. The tunnel, by contrast, looked like this. This is the 12-minute video in it from the Telegraph.
But there's
300. These are the same thing. This is a basement for storage space in a hospital. Look, this is an Israeli hospital tunnel. Like, what the? They look completely different. Also, if Israel builds a tunnel, let's say Israel built this tunnel for hospital reasons. I don't even know, for storage. I mean, the problem is not that you're using that there's a tunnel. The problem is that you use that tunnel for military purposes underneath civilian areas. You are not supposed to take your weapons and your commanders and your troops and have them hide in a tunnel underneath the hospital. That's bad. It's very bad. Because then you're kind of going to the other guys and saying, yeah, come get us. But you're going to have to go through this civilian building if you want. Because unfortunately, we are not at the stage yet where soldiers can be expected across 500 kilometers of tunnels to just get them all through like special ops, you know? There are lots of disadvantages to sending your infantrymen to go and fight in a tunnel. Number one, you're fighting in a tunnel. You don't have to be, what's the guy called? You don't have to be General Patton to know that you don't want to fight in a tunnel. God. Also, even Sinwar says they had hundreds of kilometers of tunnels. Like, why are you doing like shit that even Hamas doesn't admit to?
Are you right? That's true of that one. But I mean, they have.
It's not true. Yeah, Ethan's cucked. Fail. Ethan failed. Flopped. It's not true. The Israeli installation was different from the tunnel that was identified. They were different. They were in different parts of the hospital complex.
Vast tunnel network, obviously, as everybody knows. But I don't care. I don't want to get into the weeds on this. The $1 million question is like, what can we do? Now, it's obviously insanely difficult
as
to say.
Americans, I think we can stop aid immediately. I mean, obviously, it's not going to happen under Trump.
I'm in favor of that, by the way.
Okay. I mean, good.
Yeah, use it for concessions. Be like, do this thing, otherwise we're going to reconsider. I think it can play that role. I think cutting off weapons completely is just the kind of like, it's, I mean, there is a point where, like, if Israel's not conceding, then yeah, you should do it. But that's not going to change anything. They're just going to use less accurate weapons. Like, they can build their own. They're not going to become on par with Hamas because they don't have American arms.
Good.
I mean, I think
we should call for all aid to be ceased. And I think we should stop protecting them in the UN.
What should have Israel done on October 8th, I guess? Like, what would have been an appropriate response for their government?
I mean,
without saying not this.
What should they have done on October 8th? I mean, I think that there is they're hitting strategic sites to attempt to take out leadership. They should have. But let's talk, like...
Careful, Sam, because it turns out, if we're going by the Where's Daddy program and all that, it turns out quite a lot of these the leadership figures were in their family homes. That's where they were staying. Because if you're in your family home, you're in their head, like, you're less likely to get attacked. Like, it might even be harder to find if you're hiding in So careful, because when Israel targets head figures of Hamas, you usually see, like, the head figure dies and there's, like, 20 women and children.
Well, the leadership was underground.
Yeah, to look at that moment in history, like maybe it was.
I disagree because they had to do something.
Maybe in that moment, they had to go in and bomb or whatever they do. I think that any action that they would have taken at that point, frankly, was a function of literally decades of oppressing people and attempting to bring this to an eventuality.
Right.
I mean,
so there's, again, this is conspiratorial. There's no evidence that Israel was attempting to bring this to eventuality. Their entire policy was, if we relax measures in Gaza, like increase work permits, expand the maritime zone that Gaza has access to, allow the Qatari money in, Hamas will just chill and govern their own people. Like, they thought Sinwar was a pragmatist. So I'm just saying, like, fuck. There's no evidence that Israel was trying to bring something like this to an eventuality. It's stupid.
This was
and so what should they have done
ages ago? Well, I mean,
you're avoiding. Yeah.
Okay, I think what they should have done is begun empowering Palestinians in the West Bank. They should have done
this. Is my favorite answer, Sam. You're saying that. This is what Hasan told me. They should disband their government and lift the borders in response to the worst terrorist attack that's ever happened.
Like, talking about the West Bank, why are people so avoidant of the question? Like, just go and do diplomacy with the West Bank. Like, okay, yeah, but the West Bank's not Gaza. The West Bank isn't where the attack came from. Like,
I think honestly, when you see that your policies have failed, But I don't think this
you
was
actually
their
don't believe
agenda.
that that's a real thing, though. I'm interested in having like a real conversation. You can't like live in a fairy tale land where, in response to the worst military or terrorist attack of all time, Israel, who's already, as you state, like genocidal and racist and all these terrible things, is going to lift their borders and disband their government.
Well, wait a second. You're asking me what they should have done, and that's different.
No, in a
from
realistic way, not in a fairy
tale,
tale, Sam.
Well, listen, there is no realistic thing. Their agenda has been, it has been quite clear. Their agenda has been, since Ariel Sharon walked on the Temple Mount and tried to scuttle peace talks, the agenda since the assassination of Rabin by arch Zionists in Israel, the agenda has been to bring about this moment. There is no doubt about it. The annihilation of the Palestinian people has been an agenda in Israel for far too long. So from the perspective, it's anything I say is fantastic.
So what? So Ariel Sharon derailed the peace process by going on the Temple Mount. So apparently he's the one who caused the Second Intifada because he went to the Temple Mount, went to Al-Aqsa. Okay. So this was around the time when Israelis voted for the peace process. They voted for Barak's coalition. When Sharon withdrew from Gaza, the argument that they made was that Sharon had left the Likud to do it because Likud wanted to stay. He had abandoned the far right and gone to, or like the right wing and gone to the center right with Olmert as well, because their idea was, and I don't really agree with it, but like Sharon basically said that there is no peace partner. Like we don't trust Arafat to actually sincerely negotiate peace because of the results of Camp David and Taba. And they pulled out of Gaza because that was their way of saying that we're not going to become entangled in this area. We're not going to become entangled in this area where we can never establish the demographic majority. So we're going to leave and it's going to be not our problem. Did Sharon force people in Gaza to vote for Hamas though? Did he force Hamas to do what they did after the coup attempt from Fatah? Did he force Hamas to basically spend the next 15 years turning the entire strip into a military base? Like, no. He didn't do that. Sharon went despite the Israeli government and PA saying this will derail negotiations. Yeah, he did, but that doesn't mean that he solely derailed negotiations, or even because it's kind of like the PA. It's like the PA saying that to Sharon, which is fair, at the same time as Arafat walking away from Camp David with no counteroffer. Like it's such like who's derailing here? And also, Sharon did what he did, and that guy, he's a piece of shit. Arafat also didn't do anything to stop the Second Intifada. He didn't do anything to try and stop it.
Fantastical relative to what they would actually do.
Why can't they both be derailing? They were both derailing. Yeah, Sharon and Arafat were both. Yeah, when it came to negotiating peace, I'd argue Sharon was worse because at least Arafat like verbally conceded to some things, whereas Sharon's position was like what Sharon and Olmert combined. Their idea was just unilaterally get the out of Gaza, unilaterally chop off bits of the West Bank and leave the rest, and then just say not our problem. And if they fuck with us, we'll invade them, like, and blow them up. Like that was the Sharon position. He wanted to, like, after Sharon, there was Olmert's convergence plan to leave the West Bank in the same way that Gaza was left, albeit like keeping some settlements on the Green Line area, or like Ariel, the deeper ones. Yeah, they both acted in bad faith, but to say that this was like Sharon derailing the peace process in 2001 was because they were trying to build up for an October 7th. Like that's ridiculous. That's really dumb.
There's nothing they could have done that because of the situation, anything they would have done would have been.
There was no plan that on this day they were going to do this. But if you go back 10 or 15 years ago and look into Bibi Netanyahu's brain, the idea that this is ultimately going to happen was definitely the agenda.
No, it wasn't, Sam. You don't know anything. Oh my God. He doesn't know anything. Bro, I thought Sam would be better than this. I thought, because again, like I've argued with enough of these people, there is a way to do Sam's narrative using all facts. Okay? There's a way to do it. Just omit a bunch of other ones. No, Netanyahu's entire shtick was the total opposite. Netanyahu's entire shtick was, we are containing Hamas, they won't fuck with us. Netanyahu's position was that 2021, the campaign then, was a successful deterrent. That's what Netanyahu thought, okay? They thought the entire government, the security establishment, the Shin Bet, the IDF, they all thought that Hamas were just not serious. They were more interested in domestic affairs, and they weren't going to launch a full-scale attack. The best they would do is maybe like a small border raid. That's what they thought. That is a completely, like, that's not even defending Netanyahu, by the way. Obviously, what he did was a total failure, and him. But to say that, where's he getting that from? Does he think that Netanyahu's policy was just to bring about October 7th, like to make it happen? Like, that's just, you're just in like false flag conspiracy theory by that point. You have no evidence for that. Netanyahu thought that he could keep Hamas quiet and also keep them in control over Gaza so that the Palestinian movement is split enough so that they're not going to give Israel any issues. That was Netanyahu's position. It was contain the issue, divide and conquer. Not poke the Hamas bear into doing October 7th.
What, in terms of like attacking Gaza or inciting an attack?
I would imagine both, frankly. But to find a way to eliminate the Palestinians, this has been the agenda of at one time what I think was a smaller segment of the Israeli body politic, and I think has increasingly become an even larger portion of the Israeli politic. So, I mean, anything I say in terms of should is fantastical. Anything.
So, yeah, okay. I mean, so
what? Because they're just programmed to want to destroy all Palestinians? What a cop-out, bro. Just say what they should have done. And obviously he said military campaign against the leaders, which again, Ethan could have pushed him there and just been like, okay, so you acknowledge that if you do this, civilians are going to die. Like, you're okay with that. You're okay with Israel bombing locations that result in civilians dying because of how Hamas fights. And then Sam himself and cries, I don't know. Like, but why dodge the question? Again, like, it's really depressing when people do this, when they're like, with the amount of fury that they have over Israel's response to Hamas. And it's like, a lot of it, the sad thing is like, most of it's justified. Like, a lot of it's justified. It's justified to be angry with Israel for what they're doing in Gaza, especially the leadership, especially the lack of vision for the future, especially the lack of care for any kind of like foreseeable, peaceful future in that area. But you have to have an alternative. You have to suggest, like, I can suggest an alternative. I did it earlier in this segment. How did they target Hezbollah with minimal civilian casualties, and they can't do that for Hamas? One is the IDF's fault, I'd say, and the other is just different circumstances. It's Israel's fault for not taking Hamas seriously. They took Hezbollah seriously after 2006. They made a lot of effort getting with surveillance and bugging and moles and everything. They took their moles out of Gaza in like 2010. Their informants. The other problem is more practical. Lebanese civilians have somewhere to run away to. Not all of Lebanon is Hezbollah. There are parts of Lebanon where Hezbollah are insanely unpopular and they get a lot of pushback. I think that's an important factor, though. It's an important factor that Hezbollah just doesn't have the same grip over Lebanon that Hamas has over Gaza. Like, all of Gaza, every neighborhood pretty much has like a tunnel or a booby trap or a soldier's family, or like, that's all over. With Hezbollah, it was more contained in different parts of the country, which is why Hezbollah gets weakened militarily. They accept the ceasefire, and then Lebanon elects an anti-Hezbollah president. Okay, that's not going to happen in Gaza. You think that's going to happen in Gaza? No.
So this is like I understand where you're coming from, right? Like,
there was an opportunity for a ceasefire that was called in November, in December. They could have held a ceasefire at any point, and the amount of killing would have been far less. They could have done that. They could have ended it after a week.
I mean, Hamas could have ended the war anytime too.
How could have Hamas ended the war?
By releasing the hostages?
No, listen. Israel has said time and time again.
Well, Sam might have him here. Ethan needs to really hammer in on leaving, because it wasn't just leaving power. It wasn't just releasing the hostages. It was leaving power, giving up your arms, and releasing the hostages. It was all of those things. One of them falls, and there's no ceasefire. There's no end of the war.
that the release of the hostages is not going to end their assault on Gaza. They have said this over
I don't believe
and
that's
over and over.
I haven't seen those statements. I've seen the opposite. I believe that
you really haven't seen those statements?
No, I haven't. I'll review them. I mean, it depends when it depends when they were made too, right? Like, is it what's in response to?
At any time they could have done that.
Well, what has Hamas done to end the war?
Hamas offered
what have they done to end the war?
Early dawn to say Hamas offered all the hostages in agreement in response to Israel not coming in.
Ethan's gonna get mugged. He doesn't know this point. Oh, he doesn't know. It's true. Hamas did say very early on, albeit if you look at the actual statement, it's very vague. The original statement is something like, we'll release all the civilian hostages in exchange for Israel not doing a ground invasion. That's what Hamas said. One of their spokespersons. I think they were pressed on, like, how are you defining a civilian? And the guy wouldn't answer. You can maybe find that if you want. But let's say it was how Seder says it. Let's say they actually said, yeah, we'll give you all the hostages back. Just don't hit us anymore, please. You can't do that in the real world, like 2 days after the attack. You can't do that. Because if you do that, you've basically just said, yeah, you are actually allowed to take a free pop at Israel, kill 1,000 people, and just go back. And if you have some hostages, then you can just stop us retaliating. Like, that's a really bad deterrent. Like, can you imagine if Hezbollah got that message? If Hezbollah was like, wait, so we could actually, if we just kidnap a few people, like, we could actually just go ham and see how far we get. Like, that's a really bad incentive structure. You don't get to do that. It's like in wrestling. You know, when there's like the really big guy in the middle of the ring, and then the little short guy comes in and like whacks him on the head with a chair. And then the guy turns around and he's fine. He just looks at him funny. And the little guy's like, oh no, no. That's what it's like. It's like, bro, you whacked him with a chair.
To Gaza. I mean, there's just to defend Israel's actions as being inevitable. Like, when do you think they should have ended it?
So who have ended what?
You've asked me the question, what should have Israel done? You tell me what they should have done. Do you think what they've done is right?
Oh. Well, I've clear.
Sam's actually being soft there. He could have hammered Ethan for not knowing that thing about the hostages. Because I don't even know if Ethan's thought about that. Has he thought about what... has Ethan actually thought about what is wrong with that? Like, about what's wrong with saying, if Hamas just gave all the hostages back, like, they could just cease fire and go back to status quo. Like, yeah. Does Ethan know, does he have a response to that? I don't know.
Clearly stated no, Sam.
Okay, so tell me what they should have done.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously... hindsight is a beautiful thing, but in my opinion, like you said, I think some more specific strikes. I think more moving slowly, because as you kind of pointed out but didn't really acknowledge,
when do you think they should have ended?
Do you want me to answer?
Yeah.
So the leadership is obviously underground. So it's going to be a long mission of trying to get them. It's going to be a difficult mission. But I think militarily, they probably have some obligation to their citizenry, at the very least, to like take out but we're ignoring the fact that missiles are being shot into Israel nonstop. And I know you're going to say, you know, Iron Dome stops most of them, which is true. But at the same time, I mean, a country needs to respond to that. They can't just allow missiles to be shot in.
Tell me the non-fantastical version of what they should have done. Should it have been 2 weeks, 3 weeks? How many members of Hamas should they?
No one looks at war in this way. You shouldn't look at war in this way. It's not like you just said, what does he think war is about? The way that Sam is phrasing this with like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and this is actually where Ethan needs to think about this as well. You don't think about how long it takes, how many civilians will die necessarily. You think about your goal, and then you weigh up what that goal might cost. And then you say, okay, I'll accept that cost. Let's go. If your goal is to destroy Hamas, you have to acknowledge that a ton of Gazan civilians are going to die. There's no way around it. Israel killed a lot more than they had to, I think. But I don't think it could have been like a low number. It would have been a large number anyway. It wouldn't have been 50,000, but like you would have probably had less if they had done it more conscientiously. But you think about what the goal is, and then you pursue it, like within the law, within the rules of war. So it's not about when people say, "Oh, how much is enough? 2 weeks, 3 weeks? How many civilians is enough?" That's like war isn't about just getting revenge. It's not just about you hit them back harder or what, so they get the message. That's not what it's about. It's about whether or not you've got a just objective. And if your objective is you want, like, I don't want October 7th to ever happen again. That's what you don't want. Okay? Right. So how do you achieve that? Well, you have to get Hamas out of power. You have to get rid of their military. You have to get them out of political control, and you have to get the hostages back. Okay. So how do you pursue that? Well, it seems to be the IDF's way of pursuing that since October 7th has been to basically play whack-a-mole, is to do the opposite of what America did in Afghanistan. So they're not going to do like clear and hold. They're not going to clear a place and then put a unit there, because if you do that 50, 100, 200 times, then you're just creating a bunch of targets and making yourself very vulnerable and spreading yourself thin. That's kind of what happened in Lebanon as well. So they don't want to do that, especially if they don't have any local partners to work with. So what they decided to do was they were going to clear an area of Hamas, operate, and then leave completely. And then go, that's why they've been like operating in Jabalia like 4 times now, right? So the value of that is that you don't produce a ton of targets for Hamas. The other is that if Hamas basically goes into a regroup, then it's a diminishing return. They regroup with less infrastructure, there's less weapons, there are less buildings standing, they've got less trained soldiers, like they have to replace their good soldiers with like conscripts, like teenagers, which is what they're doing now. So you degrade them, you play a game of whack-a-mole, but like the moles are weaker each time. That's the idea. The disadvantage of that is that the civilian population in Gaza basically has to play a ethnic cleansing musical chairs. They just have to keep on wandering around Gaza and running away and going somewhere and running away and people go hungry. It's really hard to get aid anywhere. It's really hard to keep civilians safe from your bombing campaigns, because civilians are eventually going to think, well, like, I ran away from the last place to stop getting bombed. Then I got bombed in the place I ran to. Like, I'm just going to stay here and die. This. So that's your disadvantage. And also, it's really difficult to build a long-term future in those conditions. So what I would argue is that Hamas has been sufficiently degraded militarily. Like, their infrastructure is far less. They are replacing their good fighters, their seasoned fighters, with like just random conscripts who obviously have no time or space or resources to train properly. So I would argue for, and this has been said since basically, this is a large part of why Yoav Gallant left the government. The good guy, the very good guy, the great guy, the best guy, some might say. I'm joking. He argued, along with some United States figures, that Israel should start to establish zones in Gaza that have been sufficiently cleared and collaborate with local and other Arab partners to create an alternative form of governance in parts of Gaza, because that does 2 things. You can still operate against Hamas in the areas where they are strong. You can also tell the civilian population there is an alternative to Hamas. There is a future for you with Hamas gone. There will, like, Hamas gone will not just mean Israeli occupation like 67. That's what I think they should have gone for. I think they should have been doing this at least since like 8 months ago. It would have reduced the amount of civilian casualties. It would have been a much more politically viable solution. It would have given those protesters who are very bravely risking their lives against Hamas as we speak, it would have given them some kind of like alternative to point to strengthen their cause. But you know, Israel, eh? But Netanyahu didn't want to hear about that, because he is a status quo, cowardly war criminal who is probably just more interested in bombing the shit out of Gaza, killing Palestinians, and keeping himself in power, just dragging his heels. That's my position on it. Okay. But yeah, you need to think about that. You need to think about military operations and like what the goal is. Getting rid of Hamas is a just goal. Like, fuck them. They're cancer. Like, they're not good. They're not bad. They're shit ideology. They're not good for Palestinians. They're not good for Israelis. They're not good for anyone. But yeah, but you need to have an alternative. You need it. And the only alternative that Netanyahu has signaled any support for is Trump's Riviera. That's a problem. That's a sickness of the mind. Like,
they have killed before they leave, because we know that Blinken said on his way out that virtually every Hamas member of Hamas that they've killed has probably been replaced by someone who's lost a family member or an entire family or whatnot.
Oh, Sam's just doing the argument that I already pushed back against this like without even hearing it. Okay, yeah. You don't look at an army's capability in this way. If Hamas started the war with 30,000 fighters, and then now, let's say they still have 30,000 fighters, bang on the number, that does not mean they're the same strength. It doesn't mean they're even close to the same strength, because they've been replacing their seasoned, well-equipped, well-trained fighters with a of infrastructure, with decades worth of infrastructure built up, with teenagers who have to fight in rubble. I'm pretty sure a lot of these new conscripts are teenagers, but even if they're not, it's like saying, oh, you defeated the Japanese Navy, you defeated the Air Force, you defeated the infantry, their communications are completely fried, the firebombing of Tokyo has just happened. But did you know that the Japanese army is actually like 5 times larger than it was before all that happened? Well, yeah, it's because they went into total war and conscripted everyone. Like, that's not the same. That's not the same army. That is still a weaker army, even if it's got 20 million people and not 5. Yeah.
So you tell me, Ethan, if you're the one with the sensical perspective on this, and mine is fantastical, what should they have done that would have been appropriate in your mind?
Sam. Oh, no.
Yeah. So besides like special operations and stuff, I think it would have been a good idea to, I think there's a space where they could like try to find peace partners in Gaza before just destroying the whole thing. Like, obviously they approached it completely wrong, right? But there are ways, I think, that could have happened that are realistic, like trying to forge some kind of peace partner, some kind of alliance, some kind of international
All those
coalition.
People were marching. They were marching. They were marching in the Great March of Return, week after week after week.
Sam, was
he's so uninformed. What the? Really? Those are the peace partners? The Great March of Return. The Great March of Return is about destroying Israel. Like, if they got what they wanted, if they got full right of return, Israel's gone. They were trying to infiltrate civilian communities, bro. Hell, these are the peace partners, bro. Okay, hang on. Me. Where is the... I hate it, though, because, like, Israel's response to the Great March of Return is, like, there's so much room for attack on, like, criticism and condemnation of what they did. And people didn't face repercussions for it. Like, but what peace partners? This is, Ismail Haniyeh. This picture is so funny, man. He's got like Gandhi and MLK and Mandela quotes in English, by the way, just for the Western audience. They need it the most. What did he say? Palestine and Jerusalem belongs to us. We will break the walls of the blockade, remove the occupation entity, and return to all of Palestine. I'm sorry. If you talk about keeping the protest peaceful, meanwhile, we'll find out why this is as well. In his speeches, he was talking about being peaceful whilst Al-Qassam soldiers were literally on the front line fighting. We'll go to that. But, I mean, bro, what peace? These are the peace partners? Sorry, this is not a peaceful request from Israel. You can't just ask a country to abolish itself and take its chances being a minority in the Middle East as Jews. You can't do that. You can't expect that. You can't just be like, yeah, I'm sure Palestine will be the first one. The first country in 100 years in the Arab Muslim world that will be the peace partners, the immortal Abu Mazen. True. Trust the plan. Fuck me, Sam. That was a good answer from Ethan, though. That was close. That was feasible.
Kind of international
all those
coalition.
People were marching. They were marching. They were marching in the Great March of Return. Week after week after week.
Sam, was there Hamas activity at the Great March?
Sinwar was marching. Sinwar was marching with them.
Were people?
Yeah, no. Sinwar was marching behind them, telling them to to break down the border and rip their hearts out of their bodies. But okay, Sinwar's not a good dude, man. Sinwar's really bad. I don't know. Sinwar's bad. He's really bad.
Attacking the border wall?
After week after week.
Sam, was there Hamas activity at the Great March?
Sinwar was marching. Sinwar was marching with them.
Were people attacking the border wall?
During the Great March of Return, the first dozens of these things before the snipers? No, they weren't.
Yes, they were. What do you mean dozens? They were weekly. What, like the first 24 weeks of the... What? Bro, day one of the March of Return was March 30th, 2018. Here are some obituaries, in case you're interested. from Hamas's military wing website, the Al-Qassam Brigades. March 30th. How did this guy die? He was stationed at the border, went to visit another guard of the Mujahideen. Went to participate in the Great March of Return activities. Oh. An Al-Qassam soldier. I think there were 18 deaths total on the first day of the March of Return. Second one, March 30th. What were you doing when you died? Some of the young men tried to stop him. Oh, what's this? How wonderful was your jihad and how wonderful was your giving? When he took off like an arrow, as soon as he saw his close friend, his neighbor being shot and no one to help him, he shot him on the crowd. It's Hamdan. Some of the young men tried to stop him. The occupation snipers were waiting for him, especially since the injured person had been across a great distance over the eastern border. Oh, they crossed... Okay. Great distance to the eastern border. Soldier. Oh. There's quite a few of these guys. This is also March 30th. March 30th. It's a very disproportionate amount of people here dying on the first day of the Great March of Return are soldiers. It's very bizarre. Why? 5 out of 18 so far. You know, a gun. There's one death from Islamic Jihad. He died later, but he died of his wounds, I believe. He was at the March of Return as well. Where's the biography? Final hours before leaving to participate in the March of Return. Yeah. I had to get this tweet from a screenshot because it's been banned. Prominent leader in the Democratic Front, DFLP, Al-Hawajri, March 31st is when he died. Martyred on a doorstep. So that's like 7. And these are just the ones I could find. There were a few, like, some people have said there was like Al-Aqsa Martyrs people there, but I couldn't find their obituaries because all these websites get deleted. But that's 7 out of 18 are just full-on soldiers. Doodlescape, dumb It's not just that they're military wing. First of all, it's interesting that like almost half of the people who die are militants, first of all, on the first day. And then secondly, what does that say about the people who were with them, assisting them? They were trying to break through the border fence to infiltrate civilian communities. You're a idiot. Like, just because you're a civilian doesn't mean you get to go into a buffer zone that's separating two armies, two parts of an armed conflict, and try to break through to infiltrate their communities. You're not supposed to do that. It's not illegal. It's not legal. Especially if the people next to you doing the same thing are soldiers. So yes, there was a pretty disproportionate Hamas presence at the March of Return. That's on March 30th. If we go to the big one, the one where 62 people, legal by occupation rules. No, legal by international rules, dumb. Israel is a sovereign state with a right to defend its boundaries. Sorry. Doesn't mean every shooting was justified. I haven't said that. It does mean that this was not a peace offering. That's the claim. This was not a peace offering. You don't try to break down a border fence talking and with rhetoric about ripping their hearts out and reclaiming all the land. That's not really how you... that's not what an olive branch looks like. Don't stray from the original claim. Holy shit. We can look at the more busy protest, though. We can look at the more busy one. This was, the first march was in the end of March. This is by the time you reach May, middle of May. Hamas official actually admitted that 50 out of the 62 people who were killed, this was on the deadliest day of the march. It was May 14th when it happened. Yeah, 50 out of the 62 people killed were Hamas members. I think when I looked at their military website, at least 25 of them were just full-on soldiers. That's the thing. The March of Return was mostly peaceful. It was mostly on the safe side of the road. It was mostly people doing cookouts and speeches and music, selling goods. But that is distinct from the people who went to the other side of the road and decided that they were going to try to enter another country and fight with soldiers. The people who got shot were generally the ones on the latter side of the road. Almost all of them. So it's not a peace offering. That's not why they got shot. They didn't get shoot for doing a peace offering. Like, come on. Come on. I don't even need to, like, these... If you look at some of these obituaries as well, like, you can find my Obsidian notes on it. Some of these people knew they were going to die. Like, they knew that if they did this, they were going to, like... They were fighting with soldiers. If you fight with soldiers, you might die. They did it anyway. Like, they know. They understand. They understand how military installations work and how borders work, especially when they're separating two sides of an active armed conflict. Yeah. Do you think the peaceful protesters were right? Yeah, peacefully protest all you want. It's your God-given right. The original plan for the March of Return was a very good idea. The original plan, because the civilian organizers didn't tell people to go across the road. That was the Hamas hijacking that happened. The original plan on day one was to stay on the safe side of the road. And then they said that after a couple of weeks, we were going to move our tents like 20 meters forward or 50 meters forward. That was the plan. That would have made Israel look horrible. That would have made Israel look like completely unjustified to try and shoot people for doing that, for just moving their tents forward. That would have put Israel in a really difficult position. That would have been a very, very clever, peaceful protest. That's just not what they did. That's just not what happened. The people who, you can look at videos as well. Like you can see people using slingshots, which can kill you, by the way, to try and hit soldiers. You can see there were like 1 or 2 incidents where people were firing guns. You can see people burning the tires so that the people behind them could come with wire cutters to cut the fence. We can see that the fence did get cut at a few points. And if you're in that position, you're guarding a border fence. And the designers of the fence, who were, I think it was an American who said this, that fence was not particularly good for handling that many people coming towards it. Like, if that fence got enough of a breach in it, and there are literally tens of thousands of people, like 200, 300 meters away, meaning they've got like less than a couple of minutes before they could like run over and cross into Israel, that would have been a massively situation. So the fact is that border fence was a defensible military target. And attacking the fence is attacking a military target for a good reason. And defending the fence was a just cause. It doesn't mean that every shot fired by the snipers was justified. Quite a lot of them were obviously not. I can even show you like some footage of some journalist who's identified from like 300 meters away in the middle of a crowd, and they just pick him out and shoot him in the head. And all I could see him doing was like a bit of propaganda, which doesn't make you targetable. He wasn't doing incitement or anything. He was just being like, he was just gassing up the protests. But but I'm sorry, don't describe the March of Return as a peace offering. Just don't do that. You can criticize the Israeli response. You should. Don't call it a peace offering. Like, it's ridiculous.
So there were the people for peace.
There was Hamas activity. They were attacking the fence. They were like trying to cross the border.
They were
but not militants. Militants were trying to cross the border.
Yeah.
You're telling me that in the first dozen of these marches, there were people.
The first dozen? Did he just forget? Like, what do you mean the first dozen? Like 3 months in? No, on the first day. On the first day, it was like a very disproportionate amount of soldiers who got shot and killed. Yeah.
Attacking the fence?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. But
he did not say we'll tear out their heart. He said they will put fear in their heart. Oh, well. If he said that, Teuton, then a murderer who's only out of jail because of a hostage exchange says they're going to cross your border and put fear into your heart as opposed to tear it out, then it's probably not threatening, I suppose. Jesus. Yusuf Saleh is saying that's a lie. Uh-oh. Yusuf, do you want to translate? Do you want to fix this dispute? I don't know. I mean, it's hard to translate Arabic to English. Like, it could be the case that it's wrong. Let's see.
خرجنا اليوم وسنخرج على مدار الأيام القادمة.
Holy shit, Charlie, thanks for the $100. God damn. Charlie. What a guy. Thank you for your peace offering. I'm going to shoot you.
العالم كله بما في جهده ولينتظروا زحفنا الكبير. سنقتلع الحدود وسنقتلع قلوبهم.
Well, I know hudud means border, but
ولينتظروا زحفنا الكبير. سنقتلع الحدود وسنقتلع قلوبهم.
Oh wait, it cut. Why does it cut? Yep, he said rip out their hearts. Teuton, did you say that because you saw it in the comment section? Teuton! Uh-oh. Rip. It's not being incorrect is not an issue, okay? People can be incorrect. It's the method, okay? It's the thought process. Where's the full video? I don't know. I don't think I've been able to locate it, actually. Sinwar. It would be funny if he was like, they're saying we want to do this. Is it controversial to say that Sinwar kind of like wanted to kill all the Israelis? Is that not like a thing? Is that not fairly accepted? Does that need to be proven? Probably not. All right.
I mean, again,
reasonable in this. My home is and does some evil things, but like, I just want people to be fair about it, you know?
I know. I do my best.
I think that there's a way for Israel to try. I think they can obviously pursue peace. The way that they're doing it is impossible, right? Like, it's up, it's insane, it's genocidal, it's horrific.
He's dead, his opinion doesn't matter. True. That's a good argument. Banger.
They're not pursuing peace.
I'm not saying. I'm saying the opposite, Sam.
I don't think Israel is.
Well, you asked me what should they have done. I mean, obviously
Yes.
they're not pursuing peace. I agree with you. Like, quite the opposite. That's not what they're doing. But I'm saying there could have been a path, although it's not. It's
gone because Trump's in office. Say that.
Unfortunately, I think their response was inevitable based on everything that happened.
You think it was inevitable that they would kill these many people and they would use food supplies as a weapon, that they would have leveled hospitals and universities and 80-90% of the homes? I mean, how
I don't know to what extent, but like a huge response was definitely inevitable. I'm not justifying it.
Well, even Sam said that at the beginning of this conversation, didn't he?
You asked me a question. I'm answering it. You're putting this on me like I'm saying.
No. I'm just saying inevitability.
He's not talking about the scale, Sam. He's saying a big response. Obviously, it would be a big. Like it wouldn't just be cast lead, right?
I wonder what you must think of an Israeli body politic where this level of atrocity.
Okay, he literally just said he didn't know about the extent, Sam. Okay.
Inevitable.
Well, you described your and Hamas's understanding of the IDF. I wouldn't say that. I can't say to what extent, but you agree that a huge response was inevitable.
I listen. I believe a response that was inevitable by Israel, and that is because I have a much more theoretically jaded view of that country and their agenda, I think, than you. But to expect that what they've done is inevitable.
To what? Well, Sam,
I just wonder, what
is he just ignoring him now? Okay.
What it is that you think is in that body politic? Listen, I don't think it's inevitable. Just to use an example in this country, I don't think that it's inevitable that we are going to be deporting and disappearing, immigrants in this country. I think it's possible, but my perspective on America is still too optimistic to think that's inevitable. I can't even imagine what I would think would be inevitable. And I think, listen, our invasion of Iraq and the complete lack of caring and the only thing that would even mitigate that is there were no images coming out of Iraq, or very few, and certainly I was.
What? There were no images coming out of Iraq, or there were few. What, bro? What's he talking about? We were literally shown this stuff on our primetime TV, bro. We watched it like it was a TV show. Was Iraq not the first majorly televised war? Vietnam was televised. They broadcast the ground operations. They broadcast people getting surgery done on them. All right.
Exposing them more than the American population writ large, but to perceive what we did in Iraq as inevitable.
It's a different situation. That's completely, I mean, that was completely unpredictable. But we kind of touched on it. Where Hamas, and again,
they attacked a country that hadn't attacked them. It's probably the big problem with Iraq, right?
What end this even matters is it doesn't ultimately. But Hamas knew that they were going to bomb the out of Gaza.
Listen, I would imagine Hamas thought there was going to be a response, but they wouldn't have taken hostages if they thought that they couldn't use those hostages
Well, of course
as a way
they thought they could. I don't deny
deterring,
that. Yeah.
Of deterring Israel from entering, and that was a miscalculation.
That's so stupid, bro. Israel invaded Lebanon over 2 soldiers. They bombed the cock out of that country over 2 kidnapped soldiers who turned out to be dead, bro. Fuck.
On their part, they presumed that Israel was more interested in those hostages, I think, than they had assumed.
Well, and that's part of what a lot of the civil unrest in Israel is about, is that a lot of people do care about the hostages and think that the government needs to stop the war and focus on getting the hostages back and not killing innocent civilians. So that
I wonder about that last part, but
which part?
The part about the killing of innocent civilians. I mean, I think that
I said that's what they're doing.
No. I'm saying I wonder if the Israeli body politic.
Oh, you think the Israelis want civilians to die?
I think the Israelis. Obviously not all Israelis, but I think that enough of Israelis to maintain this government believe that Palestinians in Gaza, that their lives have no value, that they are all future enemies, that they that they all represent a threat to Israel, and I think that's I think that's a twisted perspective.
Just so you know, there were massive demonstrations in Israel, tens of thousands of people in a country that's relatively small. So I think
the protests are happening, and they are actually also, they're bringing photos of Gazan children who have died to these protests as well, side by side with the hostages. The police tried to ban it, apparently, and then backtracked. Because what if someone holds up a picture of a Palestinian kid that is now dead, and the police tries to rip it off them, but it turns out it's actually a picture of a hostage, because that could so easily happen. Yeah, fuck me. Oh God. No, good on the protesters though. Standing together, even drawing a big number.
Characterizing like the majority of the public as wanting.
What do you mean? It's easy to distinguish them. Why? Because the 2-year-old Gazans who've died are in burqas. They're brown ones. Shut up.
To kill civilians is a little sick, personally, but it's. I guess you could say whatever you want.
I'm basing this on conversations with Israeli reporters that does not seem to be in Israel I
thought he was going to say something like, what if they see a picture of a Gazan child and just shoot it on instinct? Me, man. I would know. Yeah. I wonder if Spider still has that video of the IDF training simulation. That's a funny meme. I want that meme. He knows what I'm talking about.
A majority, at the very least, of people who are concerned about the fate of the Palestinians in Gaza. Certainly they want hostages, and again, not all Israelis, but look, I can make analogous assessments of the United States at various times about things that reflect poorly on our national body politic as well. But the proof is in the pudding.
Can I tell you something? 300,000 protesters in Tel Aviv, 200,000 in the rest of the country. That's 500,000 people out in the street protesting the government of a country that has like 6 million or 5 million in the.
Are you talking about the protests about the judiciary?
I'm talking about to release the hostages.
Okay, to release the hostages.
Yeah, to stop, to ceasefire. Ceasefire, Sam. That's what that means.
They were
500,000.
They were calling for a ceasefire, or they were calling for a release of the hostages?
Well, what do you? What's the point of telling Hamas to release the hostages? Yeah, of course it's a ceasefire, Sam.
Well, but Israel has, and I know I'll look this up.
Deal with this. 500,000 Israel.
Wait. let's look this up and see how many times the Israeli government has said return of the hostages will not end.
Sam, I'm responding.
Yeah, it's not just about returning the hostages. Like, it's about, it would have to be Hamas giving up power. So even when these, and you can talk to these protesters as well, because those protesters in Tel Aviv, and Ethan is probably off here, those protesters in Tel Aviv generally will say, like, they'll say something like, yeah, they should cease fire so we can get the hostages back. But they can still fight Hamas. We should still get rid of Hamas. They'll say both at once. And I don't know if that's just because they don't really have a fully formed opinion of like what Israel should do, like side by side with fighting Hamas. But yeah, like they do still want Hamas gone. Obviously they do. But yeah, they want like a deal. They want a deal that can be maybe extended into a longer term ceasefire. But again, it only becomes longer term if Hamas is willing to, stop waving guns around, which is the big problem. It's doublespeak. Yeah, I think a lot of them it was, yeah. Is this the meme? It's so funny, man. Just running past the two beardy guys with guns. These guys. Anyway.
To you saying the majority of Israelis want civilians to die. 500,000 people came to the street for a ceasefire of a country of 5 million, Sam. That's 10%.
Israel just broke the latest ceasefire. Okay, where is the political response from the Israeli people? I mean, the idea that Gazans can be held responsible for an election that happened 18 years ago.
Sam, you said the majority of Israelis want civilians to die.
I think the majority of Israelis do not have a problem with what's going on in Gaza.
I think that unfortunately might be true to the extent that they've gotten.
Well, then we agree.
They've gotten much more radical. Unfortunately,
that is true. But it's also that like Israelis, because everyone knows a soldier and everyone the difference is that Israelis actually understand like a little bit about how Hamas fights and what Hamas wants, whereas Sam just seems completely clueless. Like in Sam's world, it just seems like. Hamas are just a bunch of bumbling, like wandering the field and just walking onto like the 3 rakes that are scattered over 100 square meters of field. Like just going, oh my God, I can't believe that. Oh no, let's go this way. Oh no, do a 360 little turn. Let's go this way. Oh, like no, like it's kind of partly by circumstance of the region and the fact that Israel doesn't want to let Gazan refugees into their country, even though they could. Egypt doesn't want to let them in, even though they could, unless they charge extortionate fees. And Hamas doesn't want people to leave when the IDF puts out an evacuation warning. Like, it's just by design of Hamas and also just by circumstance of the region. Like, yes, civilians are caught up in a very dense, very militarized environment. Like, Hamas chose to build tunnels all over the strip to fight from those tunnels, even though they are next to and underneath schools and hospitals and universities and every other kind of civilian building you can think of, houses. Like, we've had international journalists go into Gaza and go into a tunnel that was in a kid's bedroom, right? Like, international journalists have gone in and seen that. And I think Israelis are probably a lot more tolerant of the civilian casualties in Gaza, partly because October 7th mindfucked them, just like the Second Intifada did, but a million times more. But also because they understand a little bit about how the war works. Whereas Sam, I just don't think he has any clue.
Tragically, everybody's been a lot more radicalized since October 7th. And that's tragic. I agree. I think people in Israel are jaded and they're cynical and they don't care, like you said, and I think it's tragic.
Yes. Well, that's what my contention was. I mean, I'm looking at something from May.
I wouldn't say most of them want to kill civilians, though.
Well, I think that they don't.
And I wouldn't say that.
Like maybe ask, like, if you wanted to get around this question, you would ask Israelis, like, okay, if Hamas surrendered, they gave up political power, laid down their arms, and gave all the hostages back, would you still support fighting in Gaza? That's what, if you want to see whether or not they actually want civilians to die as like a first principle, you'd have to ask them that. But most Israelis are probably not going to say that. That's probably a bullet they wouldn't die. I don't think they care that much mostly about civilian collateral or anything like that. Like, I don't think they care. But if you ask them about killing civilians like for its own sake, you'd get very different answers, I think.
There isn't a sizable portion of of Israeli citizenry that want a ceasefire. When 500,000 people, Sam, marched out on the street of a country of 5 million for a ceasefire.
Israel's population is 10 million. Lethan line. Oh no. You talking about the Jewish population? The Jewish population is like what, 6 or 7 million?
This Pew research, 39% say Israel's military response against Hamas in Gaza has been about right. 34% say not gone far enough.
Sure.
Now, granted, that was in May of this past year, so maybe that's changed. I would hope, but that's all the most recent
horrible
data I have.
Yeah, no, I know that the sentiment
40% last year said that Israelis should govern the Gaza Strip.
I know that people.
I don't know what's left now.
Yeah, I agree. It's been
May is pre-Rafah. Is it? When did Israel go into Rafah? I never understood that. I wonder what Israeli polling actually says now for the war. No, wait, hang on. Didn't I just see that? No, was that American Jews I saw? Israel polls on the war 2025. Let's use 2025 says. Yeah, I think I don't know if JNS is reliable for this, but I mean, it seems to support what Sam would say. This was recently. 60% of Israelis nearly support return to fighting Hamas in Gaza. I don't know whether it's about not going far enough. 38 opposed resuming hostilities. Looking back at it, I never really understood why there was a red line about going into Rafah. Because at the time, I guess people thought because there was like 1 million people there, like people had been crammed into it. But it seems like they mostly were able to get out while the fighting happened. Like, yeah, I don't know. I remember thinking that like Rafah would just be an absolute like bloodbath of like tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people dying. But like that didn't seem to happen. I don't really know what the delay was all about there. Yeah. Unless it was like you've pushed Hamas into Rafah, focus on the areas in the north and like showing an alternative to Hamas. Maybe that was the purpose. I don't know.
And it's tragic what's happened because I agree with you that they've become jaded and they've become very comfortable with the idea of violence happening there in general, right? And I think it sucks. I think and sucks is an understatement. I think it's tragic and like I don't know what. Truthfully, the situation is so up.
The thing is, you'll find similar numbers on the part of Palestinians who support October 7th. Yeah, but we're in Sam Seder's world now, right? Where when Palestinians hold an abhorrent position, we understand why, because of the oppression and the violence and all that. But when Israelis hold it, even though like their political experience is also largely one of just kind of wanting to live and getting for it, like and not getting a way out of conflict and being conscripted into a military and all this shit, like, yeah, we don't care about that because they're the oppressors. We don't care about the fact that, like, yeah, we're not even going to humor for a second the idea of like an Israeli leftist who votes in favor of the peace process, gets Arafat's behavior at Camp David, and then the second Intifada, and then being like, okay, what the is going on here? Like, yeah, we don't want to stop and think about how that happened. It's just and how that might someone in the brain, but for supporting October 7th, it's like whatever.
That and like it just feels hopeless sometimes, but
it certainly does. But in the meantime, in this country, and we may not have the opportunity for a while, but we should cease all aid to Israel. We should stop protecting them in the UN. We should stop trying to pressure the ICJ and the ICC, and that's
well, incidentally, I agree with all those things too. I think that that's the most we can do as a country to try to stop the war, and it's something that we should be doing. And I think Kamala Harris would have been a lot more likely to do something on that front. Certain
we won't know.
We can't know, and that's the great thing.
Well, listen, I appreciate the time. I gotta go because I'm supposed to have dinner for my child. But,
well, I'll say this. This was way more combative than I expected. Ultimately, though, I don't think that what do we disagree on? I mean, I don't know. I don't even know. Maybe I see too much good in the Israeli population. I mean,
fuck me, man. I don't know. Unilateral like cessation of partnership with Israel is stupid. You're not going to achieve anything by doing that. It's not like, stop thinking it's South Africa. It's not South Africa. You cannot BDS it out of existence. You cannot isolate them and expect a progressive outcome from them. That's just not going to happen. It's a different environment. It's a different sentiment on both sides. It's a different sentiment. Palestinians don't want the same thing that the ANC wanted. But Ethan's kind of in this world where he's living in, I don't know if these positions are incompatible. Like maybe they're not. But it seems like he wants America to like abandon Israel and them in the UN and everything. But also when it comes to individual instances, like let's say the March of Return, or let's talk about the military response or the alternatives that could have taken place. It seems like Ethan, on the one hand, like does support some level of military campaign in Gaza, provided it had a better goal. And it also seems that he does care a little bit about like the American-Israeli sort of friendship, but then when he goes over to like cease all aid, like that's a massive policy shift for the United States, like to just stop everything. Like that's mental. That's a huge shift, and I don't really know what you would gain from it. It's not going to inhibit probably the only outcome you'd get from it is that you would embolden the Israeli right, who likes to go to Israelis and say, look, the rest of the world hates you. You cannot leave. You can't go anywhere else. Every country hates you. The United States hates you. All you have to do to survive is be strong. We only have ourselves and each other, and we have to go full sicko mode to survive. That's probably like the Iron Wall. That's the narrative that prevails if you abandon Israel as the United States. It's a bit silly, and then we isolate them more. Yeah. I don't know. You can use your partnership with Israel to actually push concessions out of them. We know this. People tried the same thing with Russia, and it was probably the right thing to do without hindsight. Like it was the right thing to try and, like in 2010, when America had like fairly positive relations with Russia compared to what they have now, that was a good thing to do to get them into WTO and all that, because like, yeah, you want to be able to, like a partnership it's easier to solve disputes and to get concessions from a partner than it is from an enemy. This is true. But the difference is that like Russia clearly just went ham and invaded a country and tried to capture parts of a country that they themselves acknowledged its sovereignty of. Like Russia acknowledged Ukrainian sovereignty and then took parts of the country. Like with Israel, they have actually made concessions based on American help, like based on American decisions. Like America was able to use their relation with Israel to get aid corridors established from October 17th. Like they started planning that. And that was because of American pressure, nothing else, right? America convinced the Israeli government into that. Stopping the first attempt at the General's Plan in October 2024. That was America threatening a review of the arms arrangement. Why would you give up that bargaining chip? Why? It doesn't make any sense.
I don't know what's ultimately the disagreements here.
Well, I mean, look, I'm not. It's largely, in my mind, impossible to really.
You can keep it, but you need to credibly. The problem is that people. The people who want to fully stop, break off partnerships with Israel, and like even in the UN and everything, the people who want that probably are just never going to be on board with where I am, because the demands that they want to make of Israel are like that's probably what's happening. Like. I feel like some people just like they want to demand of Israel that they like evacuate 100,000 settlers unilaterally and not without any concessions. I think people expect things like that, whereas I don't know, the difference between no aid and like some aid is life or death for some people. And Democrats were able to use their relations with Israel to achieve that twice. And we kind of gave that away, and you would give that away if you unilaterally withdrew aid. You would be giving away that bargaining chip, and that's a very sad thing to do. I think it's also probably good to remind Israeli leftists that they're not alone, that they do actually have a future with the United States. Like, because my God, those Tel Aviv protesters who wanted to end the war and pursue more peaceful solutions and get the hostages prioritized, God, they had so much faith in Biden. They had so much faith, and now they're on their own.
fully assess. I mean, yes, there was a protest last year, 500,000 people who wanted the hostages back in the
ceasefire.
I don't know if there's been, well, they wanted the hostages back. I don't know.
It's not a magic wand. It's a ceasefire.
Yeah, and they got a ceasefire, and then the Israeli government broke it, and they.
Well, so hold on. Our disagreements is that I'm too optimistic about the Israeli citizenry.
Again, sorry, the ceasefire, which Israel shouldn't have broken, but like Israel did offer a 50-day extension on phase 1. The problem again is that Hamas believed that they could just use that ceasefire as a way to get a full withdrawal without Hamas losing power, which is just. It's untenable. Like every debate about ceasefire, it gets convoluted because people talk about different phases and different statements that were made at different times. And like, what about this deal or this deal? The fact is that like, if you're new to the stream, hello. The fact is that most of that is just kind of like avoiding the elephant in the room, which is that Israel doesn't want any end of the conflict that keeps Hamas in power because it'll allow them to try again. And Hamas doesn't want to accept any end to the conflict that means they lose power because they want to try again. That's it. These two red lines, never the twain will be crossed. And unless one budges, then they are just going to duke it out until one side is destroyed. So
I'm not here to adjudicate what
I'm just trying to summarize our conversation. That's all.
Well, I mean, you summarize for you. I'll summarize for me. I think that, like, it is what it is. And I think I don't remember this conversation. We can put into AI and have it summarize it.
So Israel isn't interested in hostages. Got it. Yeah, of course they're not. What the have I ever said they are? Well, the government's not. The people are. The people care a lot about the hostages. Gallant cared more about the hostages, but yeah, Netanyahu doesn't give a. That's why the hostage families hate him. What do you think? That's like an extracted concession, bro? Like me.
But I,
I'll do that for you, and I'll let you know what it says.
All right,
we'll leave it to the robots.
Okay.
Sam, I do appreciate you calling in. I do value your input on all this, and I appreciate the conversation. I think it's good to have conversations like this, like open and honest, even if they're combative. And I think ultimately on the larger points we agree, but we managed to find things to fight about anyway, and that's what two Jews do, isn't it, Sam?
That happens. That's my understanding. Appreciate it. All right. Take it easy, man.
Have a great time with your children at dinner there. Enjoy.
Thanks. I will.
Bye.
All right, you too. Bye.
That was way different than I thought it was going to be.
Oh!
But okay.
Whoa. I thought it was interesting. I enjoyed that as a watcher.